I didn't believe in ghosts. Or at least that's what I thought until I got to that house. Let's call it the house on the edge of the forest, an old, crumbling one with a roof that looks like broken teeth. I went there to help the neighbors who complained about the strange noises. It's like screams, Martha, their daughter, told me when I stopped by their car. Her voice was trembling, even though she was trying to smile. The house was half a mile from their farm, deep in the woods. It looked harmless from the outside, wooden with peeling paint, but inside, the interior smelled of mold and something burnt. Martha said that her mother sometimes heard whispers in the walls, and her father saw a shadow at the window, but I put it down to nerves. Old people, lonely people, maybe they watch too many horror movies. But when we entered, I felt the hairs on my arms stand on end. Not from fear, but from a static itch in the air, like before a thunderstorm. Marta pointed to the second floor. There, in the bedroom. She heard it last night. I took a flashlight to explore the rooms. Everything was quiet on the ground floor, except for the creaking of floorboards under my feet and the sound of the wind outside the windows. But when I went up the stairs, something changed. The bedroom had a bed with a feather bed covered in dust and a chest of drawers that someone had pulled out halfway. There were old newspapers on the floor, yellow with age. I sat down to pick one up. The date was 1987. Death in a house on the edge of the forest. I read the headline. The photo showed a man in a police uniform standing at the entrance. "This is my grandfather," Martha whispered behind my back. "He died here." I didn't have time to say anything. A sound came from under the floor, a thud, as if something heavy had fallen. Then again, then silence. "Are these rats?" I asked, but Martha had already turned pale. She squeezed my hand. It was him. Who? She didn't have time to answer. The walls trembled as if the house had sighed. And suddenly a scream. He cut through the silence like a knife. Deep, hoarse, as if coming from the throat of a man who is suffocating. The scream came again, and I realized it was coming from a basement. Martha grabbed my arm. There shouldn't be anyone there. The house has been empty for decades. Then why? I began, but she was already running down the stairs, dragging me with her. The basement was dark, but I knew the door led into it. I'd seen it in the hall. But when we got there, it was locked. "It's locked," Martha said, checking the lock. "But there's no key." I looked at her. Her eyes were wide, like those of a child who is having a nightmare. "We need to find a way out," she whispered. "It's going to be dark soon." I didn't understand what she meant until I heard a scratching sound outside the basement door, as if someone was trying to open it from inside. Continuation, main plot. We ran through the whole house, but all the doors led to a dead end. The stairs to the second floor collapsed, as if someone had torn down the steps. Martha clutched at my sleeve. There should be an old key to the basement in the garage. My father said he kept it there. We reached the garage, which was spacious and had faded walls. There was a toolbox in the corner. I opened it looking for the key, but instead I saw an old note pinned to the drawer. "If you're reading this, then I'm already dead. They'll come back anyway. Close the doors. Don't believe the screams. Johnson." "My grandfather," Martha whispered. "But who are they?" I didn't have time to answer. The walls shook again, and the wind blew into the garage as if the door had swung open by itself. But I didn't hear it open. We ran back to the house, but the corridors had changed. They were longer now, narrower, like in a maze. Martha stumbled, and the flashlight slipped out of her hand. "Don't stop." I shouted, but she was already standing, looking at something behind my back. I turned around. There was blood on the wall in front of me. Not a drawing, fresh, wet. And she was moving. Drops rolled down the plaster, as if someone had just stood there and cried tears of blood. It's impossible," I whispered. "It's here," Martha said. "It's always been here." We turned a corner, and I saw a door that I hadn't noticed before. It was decorated with a carved symbol, a circle with a dot in the center. These don't look like Christian symbols," Martha said. "But it looks ancient." I pulled the handle. The door opened, and we entered a room that I still can't remember the details of. Only the smell is a mixture of rot and incense. There was something shiny on the floor. Martha picked it up. It was an old camera with dried blood on the case. "It's my grandfather's camera," she said. "He used it when..." She stopped talking. I turned on the flashlight and illuminated the wall. There were dozens of old photographs hanging there. Each one shows people who died in this house. My gaze fell on the last one, a black and white picture where my grandfather Johnson was standing, smiling, but there was something missing in his eyes. "He didn't die by accident," Martha whispered. "He knew what was going to happen." At that moment, we heard footsteps. They were approaching down the hallway, loud, as if someone was running barefoot. But it wasn't a man. The steps were too fast, too many. Martha grabbed the camera and pointed it at the door. "The camera doesn't work," she said. "There are no batteries." Then, I didn't finish. The door burst open. There was a man standing in the doorway, or what's left of it. He was burned, his skin charred, like a wax doll that had been thrown into a fire. His mouth was open in an eternal scream, but his eyes were alive. "Johnson," Martha whispered. "No," I said. "It's not him. That's what killed him." It moved towards us, and I realized that it wasn't a human. It was something else, a body made up of pieces held together. It looked like a mannequin, but with movements too fast for the mechanism. Martha darted to the side, and I followed her. We found ourselves in the kitchen, where there was an old kitchen knife on the table. I grabbed it, but it was already coming, and I could see it laughing. Not human laughter, but the rasp of metal. "It's not a ghost," Martha shouted. "This is an experiment. Something that was done in this house." "What?" I shouted, but she was already running into the basement. I followed her, but now the door was open. There was a light below, so bright it hurt my eyes. "It's a trap," Martha said. "They always come back." "Who?" "Those who created it." She pointed to the walls of the basement. Inscriptions written in blood crawled across them. "They're waiting. They are always waiting. Remember, this is not the end." I didn't have time to ask anything. It was already there. Continuation. We ran into the darkness, but the way was closed. There was a light somewhere at the end of the corridor, but was getting fainter. Martha was clutching my sleeve, and I could feel her hand shaking. "We need to find a way out," she said. "But the house, it changes shape." I stopped when I heard a sound, drops of water falling into the pool. But there was no pool in the house. "This is the basement," I whispered. "It's turned into a basement." We went down the stairs that led down, down, down. Every step echoed in the walls. There was a window at the end of the stairs, through which the forest could be seen. I approached it, but the glass was paper thin. Behind him, in the shadow of the trees, I saw figures. They stood in a circle, holding torches in their hands. Their faces were hidden by hoods, but I knew who they were. "They're the ones who did the experiments," Martha said. "They came back to finish what they started." "How?" I asked. "This is 2023. They don't die," she replied. "They turned into this." She pointed to the window. The figures began to approach the house. "We need to leave before they..." I didn't finish. The ground beneath us trembled. The walls of the basement collapsed, and we ended up in the basement under the basement. There in the center was an altar. On it were photographs of all those who had died in this house, including Martha and me. "It wasn't an accident," Martha said. "They were waiting for us." "Why?" "Because..." She stopped when I saw the inscription on the altar. "Blood for blood." "My grandfather killed them," Martha said. "He tried to stop the experiments, but they came back. Now they want us to be part of their cycle." I didn't have time to say anything. It came out of the darkness, the thing that killed Johnson. "Run!" Martha shouted. We ran, but the house shrank around us as if alive. Every turn led to a dead end, but we could hear their footsteps, the footsteps of the living and the dead that would never leave. We found ourselves in the library, where there was an old computer. Martha turned on, and the text lit up on the screen. "Time is up. You can't leave. You are part of an experiment." "It can't be," I began, but Martha was already reading on. "An experiment to create immortals." They were implanting particles of something that shouldn't exist. My grandfather tried to stop them, but they turned him into one of them. Now they're waiting to transform you two. We need to find a way out, she said. But how? I suddenly noticed a window behind the closet. It was small, but big enough to fit through. That way, I said. But first, I went to the closet and opened it. There were old folders with documents inside. One of them was signed Dr. Allison. This is the chief scientist, Martha said. He became part of the experiment himself. I opened the folder and saw the drawings, strange diagrams similar to magic symbols, but with scientific formulas. It's not witchcraft, Martha said. This is physics. They found a way to enter other dimensions, and now they want us to join them. She squeezed my hand. They want us to die so that our bodies can become their new vessels. We ran to the window, but it was closed. I hit the glass, but it didn't crack. It's protected, Martha said. They won't let us escape. Then I looked around. It was already at the door. Hurry up, Martha shouted. I rushed to the window and started kicking out the glass. It wouldn't budge. Use the knife. Stop it, she shouted. I took out a kitchen knife and stabbed it into the glass. It cracked, and I started smashing the pieces. It was getting closer, and I could see its charred body contorting as if it could change shape. Just a little more. I shouted. Martha was already in the window, and I squeezed through the opening too. We were outside in the rain. The house behind us began to collapse, bricks falling down. Run, Martha shouted. We ran through the forest until we heard screams behind us. But then I heard another sound, footsteps. We ran through the forest, tripping over tree roots and bumping into boulders. It was raining like a bucket, and I didn't know if my hands were shaking from the cold or from fear. Martha was running ahead, her hair matted from the water, and she kept looking back, as if someone was really following us. On the left. Stop it, she suddenly shouted. I looked in that direction and saw a gap between the trees. There, in the distance, the light of the farm flickered, Martha's house. But as we approached, my heart skipped a beat. The door stood open, and the windows were as dark as extinguished candles. They're already here, Martha whispered. They won't let us hide. I wanted to ask who she was talking about, but she was already running away, towards the clearing. I followed her, but a strange sound caught my attention, the creaking of wood cracking. Stop, I shouted. It's not a tree. In front of us, in the clearing, stood a man, or what's left of it. He was wearing torn clothes, and his face was burned, like the creature in the basement, but wasn't a mannequin. It was a living person who looked at us with empty eyes. Johnson, Martha asked. He didn't answer. His mouth opened and closed as if he was trying to scream, but only a wheeze came out of his throat. It's not him, I said. This is... I didn't finish. The man began to move, and his movements were ridiculous, like a doll on ropes. He was walking towards us, and I remember Martha's old notes about experiments. Perhaps it was a former neighbor who once lived next to the farm. Martha grabbed my arm and pulled me away. We ran through the bushes, and I felt the branches tearing at my arms, but it was better than staying put. Where to now? I shouted. Into the woods, she replied. There's an old hunter's house there. We can hide. We made our way through the thicket until we came across a small wooden house. The door was wide open, and the inside smelled of mold and rot. Look, Martha said, pointing at the wall. There were dozens of photographs hanging there, all the same faces that were on the altar. And one of them was new, a picture of Martha and me, taken just a few hours ago. They're watching us, I whispered. How? It's not them, she said, coming closer. That's... I do not know, but we have to find a way out. She opened the closet and took out a flashlight. When we turned it on, we saw that the floor of the house was strewn with traps, wires strung between poles and traps. It's a deer trap, Martha said. But now, she didn't finish. There was the sound of footsteps outside, and we heard someone approaching the house. They're here, I whispered. Martha grabbed a kitchen knife with a nail on the end. It was the only weapon we found. We need to leave through the back door, she said. But be careful, there could be a trap. We crept to the exit, and I froze when I saw that the door led to the swamp. The water was dark, and I could see something moving under the surface. "There's no other way," Martha said. "Either we go or—" She didn't finish. There was a crash outside. Someone was trying to open the door. "Run." "Stop it," she shouted. We jumped into the water and started swimming, but the cold got to my bones. There were shadows floating around, perhaps fish or something more. Martha suddenly froze, and I saw her foot stuck in the mud. "Help me." "Stop it," she shouted. I reached for her, but at that moment something pricked my arm. "Ah," I blurted out. She pulled my arm, and we got out onto dry land, but I felt blood dripping from my shoulder. "It was a venomous snake," Martha said, examining the scratch. "We need to find a cure." "Where?" "In the hunter's house." "But he's already there." "Who?" "The hunter. He's part of the experiment, too." I didn't have time to ask anything. There was a crunch of branches from behind. We turned around and saw a man in a hunter's mask. He had a gun in his hands, but his eyes were as empty as the man's in the clearing. "Don't shoot." I shouted. "We don't." He wasn't listening. Shot. Martha fell, and I rushed to her. "Are you okay?" "In the side." She squeezed the wound with her hand. "Run, I can't hold you back." "No, I won't leave it." "Run. Otherwise we'll both die." He took aim again. I rushed into the bushes, hearing Martha shouting at my pursuer. "You don't have to do this. This is not the end." But he wasn't listening. I ran until I came across an old road. The lights of Martha's farm were burning in the distance, but I couldn't go back. A shot rang out behind me, and I knew that Martha... No, I couldn't think about it. I ran on until I saw a light on the side of the road. "Help me!" I shouted. People came out of the darkness. "The police," one of them said. "What happened?" "There in the forest." I began, but they were already looking at me suspiciously. "You killed her, didn't you?" The policeman asked. "We found the recording from the camera. You entered the house, but she didn't come back." "It's not like that. There are others out there." They grabbed my hands. "Shut up," the policeman said. "You're already on their list." "What list?" "The list of victims." They pushed me into the car. "You don't understand," but they were already driving away. I stared out the window until Martha's farm was out of sight, and then I realized that this was just the beginning. The police took me to the police station, but something was wrong. Their conversations were quiet, almost in whispers, and they were constantly looking around, as if they were afraid that we were being watched. When I asked what was going on, one of them abruptly grabbed me by the neck. "Shut up before I want you to join her." I didn't understand what he meant until we arrived at the station. It was old, with broken windows and fire marks. There were photographs on the walls, all the same faces as in the hunter's house. "Are these your victims?" I asked, but they didn't answer. They locked me in a cell, but not in an iron one, but in a windowless room with a musty smell. I sat down on the floor and started thinking. Why were the police acting so strangely? Why are photos everywhere? And where is Martha? An hour later, the door opened, and a man in uniform entered. His face was familiar. It was Martha's neighbor, John, a farmer who always nodded silently at us on the road. "Do you know what she did?" he asked. "She broke the rules." "What are the rules?" "They're waiting. Their experiment is not over. You have to understand that this is not a mystery. This is science. What kind of experiment?" He sat down across from me. "Martin, you have to help us, or we'll send you to them." "To whom?" "There are people in the forest who didn't die. They were reborn, and they want us to support them." "How do we support it?" "We are conducting experiments. We are looking for new ones." "Do you kill people?" "No. We help them find a new shape." "How?" He took a camera out of his pocket, the one we found in the house. "Have you seen him?" he asked. "This is a memory recorder. We transfer consciousness into the bodies of others." "That's impossible." "It is possible if you know how." "And Martha?" He nodded. "She was too close to the truth. Now she's there. With them. Where? In the house. In the basement. I jumped up, but he grabbed my arm. You can help her. But for that, you need to pass the test. What's that? You have to go back there. Into the forest. Why? They're waiting. And if you don't go, they'll come after us. You summon them yourself. We can't stop. It's a cycle. You are mentally ill. He smiled. Maybe. But you're going, right? Otherwise. He pointed to the door where footsteps could be heard. You'll be where she is. I realized that I had no choice. An hour later, I was released, but on the condition that I return to the forest and find Martha. I went. It was already noon when I reached the farm. Martha's house was empty, but I saw footprints in the woods, fresh footprints leading to the old house. I entered the house. It was dark, but there was a light on in the basement. Martha was lying on the floor. Martha! I shouted. She didn't answer. Her body was immobilized, but her eyes were open and staring at one point. Did they do this to you? I asked. She didn't move. Suddenly, the door to the basement opened. John was standing in the doorway, a farmer, a policeman, part of their sect. She's alive, he said. Just waiting. Waiting for what? Waking up. Her consciousness moved to a new body. Where? He pointed to the altar where dozens of photographs lay. In one of them, perhaps in a new victim. Do you kill people to transfer consciousness? Yes, but it's not murder. This is evolution. You are mentally ill. He smiled. Maybe, but you're already a part of it. What? You heard the screams in the house. I heard footsteps. Is that you? All of us. We're moving on. And now you have to choose. A choice. Join us or remain a victim. I don't believe in your nonsense. Then tell me, why do you remember Martha falling? Because I saw it. No, you saw it because now you're there too. He nodded at my hand, and where the snake had bitten me, there was now a scar in the shape of a circle with a dot in the center. You're already one of us, John said. And now you have to choose whether to be a victim or a part of it. I choose to leave. You can't. He took out a knife. Then kill me, I said. He hesitated, and I rushed to the door. You won't understand until you see it. He shouted after me. I ran until I came across a car. There was a policeman inside, the one who had arrested me. You're back, he said. Good. He turned on the engine. Where to? To the farm. To them. I'm not. He grabbed my hand. You're already a part of it. And now you have to... No. I hit him in the face and ran out of the car. But he was right. I couldn't run away. And then I realized that this was not an experiment. It was much worse. It was a reality that I was stuck in forever. I ran through the woods until I came across the old hunter's house, the one where Martha and I were hiding. The door was open, and I went in, hoping to find shelter. But inside, everything has changed. There were pictures of me, Martha, John, and the cops on the floor. In the center was a table with a map on which points were marked. All of them led to our house. You found us, a voice said from behind me. I turned around. It was John, a farmer, a policeman, part of their sect. You're all part of it, aren't you? I asked. You bring people into the house, and we don't kill them, he interrupted. We're giving them a chance. What's the chance? He pointed at my hand, and the scar in the shape of a circle with a dot in the center was now burning like a burn. You've already passed the test, he said. Your consciousness. It's already there. Where? He opened the cabinet, and I saw dozens of bottles of liquid. Each one had a human body floating in it. They're not dead, John whispered. They are waiting. This is a crime. This is evolution. And now you have to go through the last step. Or what? He took out a knife. Or you'll join them. I rushed to the door, but it was locked. Outside the window, I saw others, those whom they called reborn. They were standing in the forest, their faces pale, but their eyes shone like those of the living. They're waiting, John said. And now they're waiting for you, too. I won't be a part of yours. He hit me. You're already a part of it. I lost consciousness. I woke up in the basement of the house. There was a note on the table. You chose the path. Now you can see them. Their screams. Their footsteps. This is not mysticism. This is your new world. I got up and saw a mirror. My face was reflected in it, but there was darkness in my eyes. I went outside. The forest was empty, but I could hear them. Screams, footsteps, whispers. Now I knew it wasn't a hallucination. They were the ones who were waiting. I found a car and tried to leave, but there were cops on the road. "You're back," one of them said. "We've been waiting." They weren't human. Their eyes were shining like the ones in the basement. "You can't stop me," I said. "We've already stopped it," John replied. "You're already one of us." They grabbed me, and I realized that it was true. Now I know they're right. It's not a crime. This is a new stage of life. And I'm waiting. I'm waiting for my mind to clear. I'm waiting until I can join them. I never thought that a simple move to a new apartment would change my life in a way I could not even imagine. It happened in October, when the days are getting shorter and the nights are quieter, as if the city is holding its breath. The apartment was located on the outskirts, in an old but well-maintained red brick complex. Cheap, quiet, with no neighbors behind the wall, ideal for a writer like me who only wanted silence and time for a novel. But on the very first night, something went wrong. I went to bed early, tired from unpacking the boxes. The only thing that broke the semi-darkness in the bedroom was the digital alarm clock, 23:47. And then I heard it, the creak of a floorboard in the living room. That unmistakable sound, like someone slowly shifting weight from heel to toe. My heart started pounding in my throat. I froze, trying to convince myself that this house was settling down, as the previous owner had said. But after a minute, the creaking was repeated. Closer. Without turning on the light, I grabbed my phone and, trembling, went into the living room. Empty. The windows are closed, the locks are intact. There was no one in the kitchen. I put it down to fatigue, but in the morning I found a piece of paper on the table that wasn't there. The word "leave" was written in angular block letters, as if someone was in a hurry. Or angry. Neighbors said that the complex has been empty for a year. The previous tenants moved out suddenly, leaving furniture. The manager muttered something about an unhealthy atmosphere, but I didn't believe him. Until I started noticing the details. There was always moisture on the mirror in the shower, even though I hadn't washed for hours. There are traces of dirt on the windowsill, like from boots. And one day I found a knife in the sink that I had never owned. The blade was shiny, and the handle was wrapped in duct tape. But the nights were the worst. Every sound became a personal enemy. The creak of the bathroom door, the rustle behind the curtain, the footsteps behind the wall that stopped when I moved. I started keeping a diary, noting the time, place, and my feelings. A week later, the recordings began to be repeated. 2:14, footsteps by the bed. 3:01, someone is breathing nearby. For 17, the smell of tobacco, even though I don't smoke. One day I woke up from the cold. The air in the room was as thick as water, and there was a shadow on the wall. Not a blurred silhouette, but a clear outline of a man standing at the door. But when I turned on the light, there was no one there. Only a spot of dampness on the wallpaper, like a map of some island. I started looking for answers. I found an article from 10 years ago in the library. The body of an unknown man was found in an abandoned house on the outskirts. Crime scene photos are my complex. Victim, a man strangled with a belt. The killer has not been found. Then I bought locks, cameras, and a gas canister. But the equipment didn't work. The cameras showed empty rooms, and the motion sensors were silent. Only once, while watching the recording, I noticed how the kitchen knife moved by itself on the table. By a millimeter. Yesterday, I found an envelope without an address in my mailbox. Inside is a photo of me at the window, taken from a nearby building. On the back, "You're next." And then I realized this is not a house. It's someone who's been waiting for me, who is watching, studying, playing. And tonight, when I heard the bedroom door open slowly, with a soft creak, I didn't hide. I took the knife out of the sink and turned around. Do you know what's scariest? Not footsteps, not shadows, not threats. And the realization that you've never been alone. That someone is breathing behind your back while you sleep. I stood there clutching the knife so that my palm was numb. The door was closed. There wasn't a scratch on the glass. Only silence, thick as pitch. But the smell of tobacco became stronger. It hung in the air like the breath of a smoker, standing close. I took a step forward, and then something crunched under my foot. Photo, the one from the envelope. But now a new word had been added to the back. Why? The letters were trembling, as if the writer was afraid or in a hurry. I rushed to the window, opened it, and the cold wind hit my face. No one. There was only a trash can in the yard, bent by the wind, and the shadow of a lantern creeping along the wall of the house opposite. I went to the police this morning. The attendant, a sergeant with gray temples, listened nodding, but his eyes remained empty. Paranoia, he said, shuffling through the papers. It's quiet in this area. I showed them the photos, the threats, and told them about the article. He sighed. That incident is a cold trail. No evidence has been established, not even the identity of the victim. I came home feeling like I was talking to a wall. I didn't sleep last night. He settled into a chair with a baseball bat and waited. The clock was ticking like a bomb. At 3:12, the bathroom door creaked. I stood up, the bat shaking in my hands. There was a light on in the bathroom. I was definitely turning it off. On the mirror, over the drops of water, someone wrote with my own shaving cream, "He sees." I brushed the inscription away with my sleeve, but something glinted in the sink. A gold chain with a locket. Not mine. Inside is a faded photograph of a woman in her 40s with piercing green eyes. The engraving on the back of the medallion was barely legible. MK 1987. It became an obsession. I searched through the archives, searched for the names of the residents of the complex, interviewed the old residents of the area. No one wanted to talk. Only the bartender in the diner around the corner, a scowling man with a tattoo of "Silence is Gold" on his fingers, muttered, "Everything is clean here. But if you find something, stay out of it." And then my neighbor disappeared. Ellen, an elderly woman from the 3rd floor who watered the flowers on the balcony every morning. Her door was open, and her apartment was empty. Only there was a postcard on the kitchen table. "Thank you for everything. Ellen." It's not her handwriting, and the smell of tobacco was in the air. I bought a dictaphone and set up traps made of thread and bells at the doors. There were no calls at night. But in the morning I discovered that someone had carefully collected the threads and put them in a shoebox. Inside is my own photo on the back. "You're almost ready." Today I found a diary in a box of books. Not mine. On the first page, he's here. He's waiting for me to break down. But I'm not leaving. This is my home. The last entry was dated a week earlier. He knows about Ellen. And about the locket. It's too late to run. I'm still here. I'm sitting in the dark with a knife in my hand and listening to the wind beating against the window. Someone is walking on the roof. Heavy, confident footsteps. They are approaching the stairs. Or maybe it's rats. Or I'm going crazy. I got up to check the stairs to the roof, but the lock was intact, rusty, untouched for years. But on the steps leading up, I noticed a tiny Marlboro cigarette, but fresh. The traces of ash had not yet had time to mix with the dust. Someone smoked here quite recently. When I returned to the apartment, I found that the closet door in the bedroom was ajar. Inside, among my clothes, was a stack of old newspapers. All the articles were about the same thing: disappearances in the area over the past 20 years. Names of victims, photos of crime scenes, hand-drawn diagrams. On the last page, someone circled the dates with a red marker. They all matched the numbers when I found the threats in my apartment. In the morning, I went to the bartender. His place smelled of beer and damp, like an aquarium that hadn't been cleaned in a long time. "I want to know the truth," I said, putting a locket with a photo of a woman on the counter. He flinched when he saw him, and for a second his fingers froze over the beer tap. "This is Margaret Kelly," he muttered at last. "Her husband disappeared in '94. She lived here until... He didn't finish. Until she disappeared on her own. The bartender nodded, wiping the glass with a dirty-looking cloth. He's back, he added softly. The one who killed her husband. They say he's watching the house, waiting for someone to start digging. In the evening, I was sitting in the dark with a dictaphone again. At 2:09, there was a knock on the door. Not sharp, not insistent, but 3 strokes, as if someone was checking to see if I was at home. I didn't move. Then a board creaked behind me, and I whirled around. There was a note on the table. Have you found Margaret? The letters were cut out of newspaper headlines, like in old maniac movies. I ran out into the hallway, but the landing was empty. Only the door to the apartment opposite opened slightly, and I heard a whisper, "Leave before it's too late." The voice belonged to a woman. I came home from work today and found that someone had gone through all my boxes. Books, clothes, documents, everything is scattered, but nothing is missing. Except for the diary I found earlier. There was a cassette in its place. I put it in an old tape recorder. "He's here," a man's voice croaked, distorted by static. "He's in the walls, in the ventilation. He hears your every breath. Run, run now." Then the sound of footsteps, a crash, as if the speaker had been dropped, and silence. I'm still listening to this tape, over and over again, because at the very end, behind the noise, there is something else. A quiet laugh, and the sound of my apartment door opening that I turned off the tape recorder and froze. The door to the apartment was closed, the chain was in place, but there was a match in the hallway, right on the threshold. An ordinary wooden match, broken in half. The one I saw in the archive photo is in the hand of the murdered man whose body was found here 20 years ago. In the morning, I went to the archive of the local newspaper. The old archivist, a stooping man in glasses with a cracked lens, rummaged through the folders for a long time. "Margaret Kelly," he muttered. Yes, there was a story. Her husband, Thomas, worked as a security guard. He disappeared after his shift. There are no traces. And she... He paused, pulling out a yellowed envelope. There was a photograph inside, Margaret against the background of this very house, holding a locket in her hands. Next to her is a man in a security guard's uniform. His face was crossed out with a red marker. "She disappeared a year later," said the archivist. "The police have closed the case, but there were rumors." He leaned closer, as if he was afraid the walls would overhear. "They said Thomas was killed because he knew about smuggling through the port, about people who..." He didn't finish. A siren wailed outside the window, and the old man flinched as if from a blow. When I got home, I noticed that the lock on the bathroom door was greased. Not with my oil. It was written on the mirror again, now in lipstick, "He knows that you know." I erased the inscription, but in the sink I found a piece of cloth dark blue, like the uniform of the guard in the photo. At night, I decided to check the attic. The stairs creaked with every step, and it smelled of mold and old wood. In the corner, under a layer of dust, there was a metal box. Inside were bundles of documents tied with rubber bands and a pistol. Not loaded, but with a silencer. Among the papers are bills in the name of Thomas Kelly, transfers from offshore accounts, photographs of boxes of weapons in the port. I didn't hear him come in. I just felt the smell of tobacco, sharp, corrosive. Turning around, I saw a silhouette in the doorway. Tall, broad-shouldered. I have a knife in my hand, the one for my shell. "You shouldn't have dug," he said in a hoarse voice. "Now I'll have to take you out." I didn't move, looking at the knife in his hand. The blade glinted in the moonlight, filtering through the dirty attic window. The smell of tobacco mixed with the smell of rust and old dust. "You don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have already handed over copies of the documents to the police. If something happens to me, they will make everything public." It was a lie, but I saw him freeze for a moment. "You're lying," he croaked, but he took a step back toward the door. I took advantage of this by grabbing a pistol with a silencer and throwing it at him. He knocked away with his hand, but it gave me a second. I ran for the stairs, tripped over a floorboard, and rolled down, hitting my shoulder painfully. He was already on the first floor when I jumped out into the hallway. The door to the apartment opposite, the one that had opened earlier, was now standing wide open. I rushed inside, slammed the door, and slid the latch. Someone was breathing in the darkness. "Not me. Get out of here," a female voice whispered. "He can't find you." It was a neighbor who whispered a warning to me. Her silhouette was barely discernible in the corner, thin, with gray hair gathered in a bun. "He killed Ellen, and Margaret, and everyone who tried to uncover the smuggling." I interrupted. She laughed a dry laugh. "Do you think it's about guns? It's about people. He sold them through the port. A living commodity. Thomas found out, and he was strangled with a belt." The door shook from the impact. He was there. "Over here." The woman pushed me towards a window. There was a bunch of keys on the windowsill. "The basement. The door is under the stairs." I jumped out into the cold night and ran, not understanding the road. In the morning, I returned with the police. But the apartment opposite was empty. There was no sign of the woman, no keys, not even dust on the floor. The only thing on the wall was Margaret's locket, the one with her picture. And a note, "He knows where you live." I'm sitting in my apartment right now, staring at the door. The smell of tobacco is here again. And footsteps on the roof. I didn't move, looking at the knife in his hand. The blade glinted in the moonlight filtering through the dirty attic window. The smell of tobacco mixed with the smell of rust and old dust. "You don't understand," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have already handed over copies of the documents to the police. If something happens to me, they will make everything public." It was a lie, but I saw him freeze for a moment. "You're lying," he croaked, but he took a step back toward the door. I took advantage of this by grabbing a pistol with a silencer and throwing it at him. He knocked it away with his hand, but it gave me a second. I ran for the stairs, tripped over a floorboard, and rolled down, hitting my shoulder painfully. He was already on the first floor when I jumped out into the hallway. The door to the apartment opposite, the one that had opened earlier, was now standing wide open. I rushed inside, slammed the door, and slid the latch. Someone was breathing in the darkness. "Not me. Get out of here," a female voice whispered. "He can't find you." It was a neighbor who whispered a warning to me. Her silhouette was barely discernible in the corner, thin, with gray hair gathered in a bun. "He killed Ellen, and Margaret, and everyone who tried to uncover the smuggling." I interrupted. She laughed a dry laugh. "Do you think it's about guns? It's about people. He sold them through the port. A living commodity. Thomas found out, and he was strangled with a belt." The door shook from the impact. He was there. "Over here." The woman pushed me towards a window. There was a bunch of keys on the windowsill. "The basement. The door is under the stairs." I jumped out into the cold night and ran, not understanding the road. In the morning, I returned with the police. But the apartment opposite was empty. There was no sign of the woman, no keys, not even dust on the floor. The only thing on the wall was Margaret's locket, the one with her picture. And a note, "He knows where you live." I'm sitting in my apartment right now, staring at the door that I stopped counting the days. Time dissolved like sugar in dirty water. The police are no longer answering the phone. The bartender disappeared, and his diner was boarded up. The archivist died of a heart attack, the newspaper said. Margaret's locket is in my pocket, cold as a bullet. He comes every night, not through the door or through the window. He just appears in the corner, behind the curtain, at the bathroom door. The knife in his hand is always the same, with a rusty blade and duct tape on the handle. We are silent. He's waiting for me to break down. I'm waiting for him to make a mistake. Yesterday, I found my passport in the mailbox, with the date of issue in 1994, but I was born in 1985. Inside was a picture of me, Ellen, Margaret, and Thomas at the harbor. We're smiling. There is an inscription on the back, family. I went out onto the roof. He was standing at the edge, with his back to me. "You don't understand," he said without turning around. "It's not about smuggling. It's about a vicious circle. You write stories, but you live in an eternal scenario. Running is part of the game." I jumped on him. We rolled on the tiles. His fingers clawed at my throat, but I stabbed him with a knife, the one from the sink. He laughed, and blood gushed onto my hands. "Do you think this is the end?" "Stop it," he croaked. "This is just the beginning." He fell off the roof. I heard his body hit the ground, but there was no blood on the asphalt this morning. Just a Marlboro stub at my door. Now, I'm writing this at the station. The detective who's interrogating me looks like that sergeant, but younger. "You're the only one in town who believes in these fairy tales," he says, flipping through my notes. I'm silent. Behind him, in the glass of the window, I see a reflection. A man in a guard's uniform, his face crossed with a red stripe. They're letting me go. It's cloudy outside. My phone rings in my pocket, an unknown number. "Have you found the truth?" a female voice asks. It's not Ellen. Not Margaret. "No," I reply. I became her. Footsteps behind him. The smell of tobacco. I don't turn around. We both know that the game is on, and that next time I'll be holding a knife in my hand, and he'll be holding my passport with someone else's date of birth. The finale? This is not the final. It's just another frame in the film that can't be rewound. Just watch, and wait for the projectionist to say, "Cut." But the projectionist is silent. You have just experienced a story where the main enemy is not ghosts or monsters, but people. People who hide their secrets behind the walls of old houses, in documents from offshore accounts, in silence that seems safe. This is a story about how the past clings to the present like a sticky web. That evil doesn't always hiss or scare. Sometimes it just waits, watching you slowly go crazy, trying to figure out if the footsteps outside the door are real, or if it's your nerves. The main character, like you, wanted to believe in the rational. But the deeper he dug, the clearer it became. The truth is worse than any fiction. People smuggling, disappearances, double lives. All this was hidden behind the mask of an ordinary house. And the one who was chasing him, he's not a demon. He is the man who strangled Thomas Kelly 20 years ago, and now methodically removes those who get too close to the truth, or becomes her. The finale leaves questions. Which of them is the hunter now, and which is the victim? Does a person change when they learn too much? Or is he just becoming part of the system he was trying to destroy? This is not a story about the fear of the dark. This is a story about the fear of what lies behind the light. That we never know who's behind the next door, or whose voice whispers, "Go away," when it's too late. Thank you for staying until the end. Now check the locks. Suddenly, the footsteps behind the wall are not yours. I've always thought that silence is peace. When I was a teenager, silence meant that everything was fine. My mother was at work, my father was in the garage, I was in the room with headphones, the world was immersed in serenity. It was only over time that I realized that silence doesn't always give you freedom. Sometimes it hides things inside that you can't hide from even behind a closed door, especially at night. I didn't move into this house out of love for the neighborhood. To be honest, I just couldn't afford anything better. An old one-story house at the back of a dead-end street, in an area where garbage is not taken out according to schedule, and the neighbors are silent even when someone is shouting nearby. I won't say that I was scared. I've long been used to not waiting for help. It was a rental, cheap, no questions asked. I signed the contract, drove in, put a mattress on the floor, a table, a couple of lamps, and a monitor. Everything I needed to work and survive. The first nights were normal. Creaks, wind, old pipes. When you live alone, you quickly learn to distinguish between sounds, a refrigerator that periodically clicks when the compressor turns on, wood that shrinks under the temperature, a roof over which fallen leaves run. The mind learns to filter out noise. But one day, he started to bring them back. It all started with footsteps. Not loud, not in a hurry. It's just a step, a pause, another step, as if someone is walking on the carpet with bare feet. I heard them at about 3 in the morning, at the deadest time of the day, when the city seemed to freeze. The footsteps were almost inaudible, but I didn't make them up. I can distinguish the hum of a heater from a human's gait. They were always the same. It was as if someone had come out of the hallway and walked towards my bedroom, but they never made it to the door. I waited, froze, listened, and nothing. Everything stopped. There was no click of a pen, no knock, just silence, which was more oppressive than any scream. I didn't panic right away. I'm an adult. Rational. I checked the windows, locks, doors, and climbed into the attic. Nothing. I even bought a motion sensor camera and put it in the hallway. I've reviewed all the records, but it's empty. There was no movement. Just me sleeping in a strange position with an anxious half-hint of insomnia on my face. I started going to bed later, not because I wanted to stay awake, but because I didn't want to hear those footsteps. But the later I fell asleep, the stronger the feeling that I was not alone. And this is not mysticism, not energy. It's a purely animal feeling. You know it when you enter an unfamiliar room and you definitely feel that someone has been there recently. Not a smell, not a sound, not a shadow, just a presence. Then the little things started happening. The keys I put on the dresser ended up at the sink the next morning. The phone was on the floor, ready to charge. I started to think that I was just getting tired, confusing things. I work a lot, I hardly leave the house, I lose focus. I didn't want to admit that I didn't have control over where and what I left. But then the steps began with the answer. I wasn't just listening anymore. I started checking. I got up, went out into the corridor, turned on the light, and there was silence. And as soon as I went back and lay down again, I took a step. I got up again, nothing. On the fourth night, I sat down with a cup of coffee on a chair opposite the bedroom door. I just sat there waiting. It was 2:47 on the clock. I remember exactly. At 3:08, I heard them. The first step. I froze. The second one is closer. The third one is almost at the door. I didn't move. I couldn't see anything, but I knew someone was there. I yanked the door open. Empty. Not a soul. There was no air. No wind. Nothing. But I felt like I didn't make it. That someone had already left. He didn't disappear, but he was leaving when I opened the door. I didn't sleep at night anymore. I couldn't. I set up the camera, and one night it picked up a sound, not footsteps, but a click, as if fingers were running over the wallpaper. Pause. Click again. And the third one. That's it. I've played the recording dozens of times. I even took out the sound, applied filters, cleaning, compared it with background noises. It wasn't a glitch. I started noticing footprints. Not shoe prints, but dents in the carpet. Heavy, deep, as if someone had been standing there for a long time. The next morning, I took a photo, and then checked again a day later. They were shifted, as if whoever left them had moved a little sideways. I started putting matches in the doors. If someone opens the door, the match will fall. In the morning, I found 2 matches on the floor, one in the kitchen and the other in the bathroom. Both were intact, as if the doors were opening slowly with precision. I didn't tell anyone. Who would have believed it? This is not paranoia. I felt like I was being watched, but not from outside, from inside the house. Things didn't move by themselves, but they were moved. The footsteps didn't sound random. They heard me when I was listening. One day I found a note, a small piece of paper on the back of the receipt. The handwriting was strange, ragged, careless. It read, "You hear footsteps, and I can hear how afraid you are of them." I almost dropped the paper. I do not know who wrote it. I kept it in a drawer, but it disappeared a day later. Instead, there is another piece of paper. "When you sleep, I only move things. When you're awake, I'm wondering if I should move you." From that moment on, I started locking the bedroom door. But even then, the footsteps continued. They didn't reach the door, but they were there, closer. It's like someone is standing behind her, leaning his forehead against a tree. Sometimes I could hear soft breathing, not the wind, present. And then I realized that if I want to survive, I have to figure out who it is. That I didn't know how you could go on living when you were waiting every night for someone to be at the door, or that someone's already inside. Not just in the house, but in your space, in your air, among your things. I checked the locks 10 times. I started putting cups and objects on the floor near the door so that if something moved, I would hear it. And I heard it. A couple of times I woke up from the ringing, as if someone had accidentally touched them when I approached. And again, silence. No creaking, no sound of running footsteps. Simply silence. Pressing. Lively. I decided not just to observe, but to act. I started keeping a diary not on my phone, but on paper. He recorded every sound, every moment, time, environment, everything that happened, even if it seemed unimportant. At some point, it seemed to me that I no longer lived here. I'm a guest, a constant, unwanted guest in your own home. And they made it clear to me that I'm here temporarily. The strangest thing started when I tried to leave. Just break out of this routine. I packed my bag, turned off the equipment, left the house, and went to a friend's house in a neighboring city. I slept at his place. Conversations, food, warm company, everything seems to be fine. But on the second night, I woke up sweating. The walls of someone else's apartment. Cold. And there are footsteps in my ears. And they weren't dreams. I didn't sleep. I looked into the darkness and heard someone walking on the floor on the carpet, as if he knew where I was. I even thought, what if it wasn't a house? What if it's something behind me? But then I came back. Everything was the same inside. Dust. Silence. Only one thing has changed. There's paper taped to the refrigerator, right in the middle of the white door. Clean empty. But I felt that she wasn't random. I took it off and put it in the table. In a couple of hours, the second one. Already with the text. Did you think you could just leave? It wasn't paranoia. Someone was in my house, knew where I was, what I was doing when I slept, when I woke up. It was a man. And that was the most frightening thing. Because a person doesn't obey logic. He doesn't explain himself. He does what he sees fit. And you don't know what he's willing to do. I started checking the walls. Not at hiding places, not at cameras. I was looking for traces of life. Where could he be? Where could he live? I listened to the emptiness, knocked. Once I heard a short echo from the wall, in the pantry. I raised my ear and heard a soft, short exhale. Not a rustle. No creaking. Namely, exhale. It was like someone was hiding and couldn't hold their breath when I approached. I stepped back, as if in a dream, and just stood there. I didn't open it. He didn't scream. I just realized that if I open it now, everything will change. I wasn't ready for this. That night, I sat in a chair by the window until dawn. I didn't sleep, I didn't eat. I just waited, but nothing happened. And that's the scariest part. When you don't know if something is going to happen, or if you're just being kept waiting. A day later, I discovered that the camera in the hallway was turned off. The memory card is removed. I'm sure I left it there. But in its place was a small piece of paper with one line. Do you want to know who I am? I'm the one who knows what you don't want to know. I couldn't stand it. I called the police. I explained that someone was breaking into my house, moving things, writing notes. They arrived, interviewed, examined the rooms, took a couple photos, and left. Said, you are alone, the locks are intact, there are no signs of forced entry. Maybe it was nerves. I didn't blame them. Outwardly, everything was clean. A house is like a house. A man is like a man. But they didn't hear footsteps. You didn't live with the feeling that someone was pressing against the walls behind your back. I tried to normalize my life again. Work. To do things. Sleep at least a couple of hours a day. But then I saw that in one of the cupboards at the very back, there was my old shoe. I remember for sure that he was on the balcony. I haven't worn it for a long time, but it was there in the closet. And inside there is a small candy wrapper. Not mine. And it wouldn't have been scary if I hadn't smelled someone else's scent. Sweet. The kind that comes from a body that hasn't washed its clothes for a long time. I sat and looked at the closet. Long. About 10 minutes. And I realized he wasn't just here. He lived here. He didn't come. He didn't sneak. He didn't sneak. He was inside, like a roommate you couldn't see. You just feel it. Later, I found another trail. Under the bathroom. A small metal object. At first, I thought it was just a spare part. But then I realized it was a piece of an old knife. The blade is broken off, and there's a cloth on the handle. Absorbed. And then I realized that he wasn't just watching. He's ready. He leaves the details as labels. He builds his points of control. You can say, eat it. But where to? He's not leaving. He gets attached. He knows I have nowhere to go. And now I know for sure that the footsteps are not an auditory deception. He's the one who's training. Trains his approach. He teaches me to be afraid. I found another note today. It was taped on the inside of the door that I leave in the morning. I haven't opened the door since last night. The paper looked fresh. It said, "When you feel the touch, it will be too late to be afraid." And I'm still sitting there, not moving. I can feel the cold creeping under my skin. Not from the cold, but from awareness. All I heard, all I felt was preparation. He wasn't playing. He waited. And I do not know what I didn't know what to do next. It felt as if the entire space around them had been compressed to a single point, to this note on the inside of the door. I held it in my hand, but my fingers were shaking, as if I had touched something alive. As if someone had just put down the paper itself. I didn't hear or feel how it happened. And it was maddening to realize that a person who could enter your house while you were here and leave a message had long since stopped perceiving boundaries the way we perceive them. I didn't immediately realize what I was doing when I started checking the windows. I went through every room, every window, lock, hinge, even the cracks at the baseboards. I was looking for something that I had never looked for before. Not footprints, not things, but presence. It wasn't physical. It was like a smell that you can't see, but that remains. It's like a look you don't notice, but you can feel it on your skin. And the more I checked, the more I realized how much this man got used to the space. He didn't just know the house. He was at home in it. At first, I wanted to escape. Open the door, run out, don't turn around. But something stopped me. Not fear, but the certainty that it won't help. He's not tied to a place. He's attached to me. And as terrible as it sounds, I'm part of his plan now. I am a target, an object, perhaps an experiment. But not medically, not psychologically. Social. He studied how far a person can go without breaking the laws, without leaving evidence, without showing aggression directly, but causing destruction in another way. Complete, methodical, permanent. The next morning, I woke up to a sound. Not loud, very subtle. It was as if a fingernail had been drawn across the inside of the glass. Once, and everything. I froze, was listening. Nothing. But the sound was so clear that I stood up. He went to the window. The usual kind. Street. Cars. People. But there's a stone inside. The unbearable feeling that I'm not alone. I closed all the curtains. That's it. The house became as dark as a box. I couldn't see the street anymore. I didn't want to be visible. 2 days later, I started noticing that someone was eating in the fridge. Quite a bit. Half of the yogurt. A few slices of sausage. Something that you might not notice if you're not watching. But I started measuring everything. Bottled water. The sugar level in the sugar bowl. The position of the spoons. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. I couldn't imagine how anyone could get into the house without leaving a trace. But it was happening. And then one day, late at night, I heard a closet creak. I didn't move. I lay covered with a blanket and just listened. The creaking was not loud, but it was closer than usual. In the room, I slowly reached for the phone, started recording, but then I heard something else, a breath. Not mine. I held my breath, and that was a mistake. Because in the silence, that breath sounded like a hoarse, long sound, as if a person standing a few meters away suddenly remembered to breathe. I do not know how long I lay there without moving. Maybe an hour, maybe 2. I didn't hear him come out. I didn't hear any footsteps. But in the morning, when the sun lit up the room a little, I realized that there was a piece of paper on the floor next to the bed. Plain white, with a new line. You're getting closer to understanding, but won't be good for you. I started to wonder, who is it? Why is he doing this? Why me? But the worst part is that part of me got used to it. This is not normal, but the brain adapts. I began to perceive him as a constant presence, as a neighbor, as a tenant who is not visible, but who is somewhere nearby, who is watching. I put the recorder in the closet. I left it overnight. I listened to it in the morning. Almost an hour of silence. Then a short sound, the rustle of clothes. 10 minutes later, a phrase. Quiet, barely discernible. Why are you trying to hear if you don't want to know? It was said calmly, assuredly. No rage, no fear. I was sitting with a dictaphone in my hand, and I felt like everything was shrinking inside me. Someone was whispering next to my things in my house, and doing it as if it were his house. After that, I removed all the cameras. Everything that records. It didn't make sense. I realized that he didn't mind me knowing. He's even interested in that. He wants me to feel. He wants me to live in it, so that I would not just be afraid, but think about him every second. In the evening, I saw another note. Under the glass of a microwave, I do not know when he put it there. There was, do you think this is all the beginning? What if he just didn't notice how it had already ended? I haven't slept in 2 days. My eyes were burning and my hands were shaking, but I couldn't leave. I couldn't leave my house, my things, or myself. He was already a part of everything. And the most frightening thing is not that he's here. The thing is, I do not know when he started being here. Maybe it all started long before the first steps. Maybe he was always there, just hadn't made himself felt before. And now I've decided it's time to get to know each other better. I started to wonder from what point everything went wrong. Where was the turning point after which I stopped being alone in my own house? Not in terms of someone's presence, but psychologically. When I stopped feeling safe as something normal. I tried to remember the first few weeks after moving in, wondering if there wasn't something strange back then. Maybe I just didn't notice. Maybe I was too busy unpacking boxes, connecting the internet, working. Maybe he was already walking around the house while I was sleeping, and just didn't leave any traces. And, that's what started to drive me crazy. The thought that he's been around for a long time. He just used to play differently. I started carrying a dictaphone with me, even to the bathroom. I recorded sounds in the bedroom, in the bathroom, in the kitchen. Sometimes at night, when I listened to these recordings, I found myself sitting in complete silence, listening to the breathing in the background. And I didn't know if it was mine. On one of the recordings, I heard the dishwasher open at 3:17 at night. At first, there was a click, as if the door had been slightly pulled. Then there was a soft thud, as if something had been put inside. I was asleep at the time. I'm sure I would have woken up if someone had been walking through the kitchen. But there was a recording, and there was sound. I went to check. There's nothing special inside. There's only one cup that I definitely didn't put there. The following week, I started writing a list. What I put where, at what time, in what condition. It turned into an obsession. I recorded how compressed the toothpaste tube was, the position of the keys on the shelf, and even how turned on the bathroom faucet was. Not because I wanted to catch him, but because I wanted to make sure that I still owned something in this space. One day, when I woke up in the morning, I found that my t-shirt was hanging out of place. It always hangs on the left hook of the closet. In the morning, she was on the right. I might have thought that I had made a mistake myself, but it was fastened with one button, which I never fastened. Never. I didn't even know she was there. It wasn't just fear. It was a pervasive anxiety that did not leave even in public places. I began to notice that someone was following me around the store. Not close, but in sight. Someone who doesn't do anything suspicious, but is always there. I went into the coffee shop, and he was already there, drinking something by the window. I went out to the pharmacy, and a minute later, I heard the door open behind me again. And one day, I saw a man I had already seen in several places walk past me in the park. I stopped, turned around, and walked the other way. 10 minutes later, he passed by again. He didn't look at me. He just passed through. As if he'd said, I can be anywhere and you won't do anything. I returned home in the evening and decided not to turn on the light. I just sat in the kitchen and waited. Nothing was happening. I sat there for almost 2 hours. He was silent. He was breathing. He peered into the darkness. And suddenly I heard a soft sound, somewhere from the depths of the apartment. A drop of water fell into the bathroom sink. No more sound. I walked there slowly, step by step, in complete silence. I didn't turn on the light. I just walked to the bathroom. He stood in the doorway. I'm looking. Silence. The sink is dry. Not a single drop. When I returned to the kitchen, there was a piece of paper on the table. Plain paper. Written in black pen, neat handwriting. You're looking into the dark, hoping to see me. But all this time you had to look at yourself. I do not know what he meant by that. But I realized one thing for sure. He's not just watching anymore. He plays. He's creating a script in which I'm the main character. He's like a director, but everything happens in reality. He doesn't break down doors. He doesn't steal things. He changes the small to destroy the big. Inside. In my head. In life. I stopped inviting friends to visit. I stopped calling anyone. Because I was afraid that he would start coming to them. And then it won't be my paranoia, but their reality. I couldn't let that happen. It's better to burn alone than to drag others into something that has no name. Sometimes at night, I think I hear someone walking on the carpet in the living room. But there are no footsteps. Only the muffled sound of weight shifting. Easy. Sure. It's like he knows where the creek is and avoids them. Sometimes I lie with my eyes open and just count my breaths, not to calm down, and to make sure that there are two of them. Otherwise, it will seem to me that someone is breathing nearby. At some point, I realized that I had started listening to sounds not out of fear, but out of habit. I stopped hoping that the morning would come and it would get easier. Light no longer meant safety. He just made everything clearer. In the dark, there was at least some space for doubt, for the fantasy that maybe it was all just my imagination. But during the day, I saw things that couldn't be explained. For example, a small scratch appeared on the wall in the hallway. I didn't pay attention. You never know. I touched something. But the next day it got a little longer, then deeper. And one morning I saw a thin line of dust coming from it, as if someone had run a fingernail over it. I didn't touch her. He just stared and slowly stepped back, not looking away. I no longer tried to pretend that this was not happening. I just lived in it. No complaints. Without a fight. It was like resigned. I resigned myself until I saw something that completely destroyed all boundaries. It was a recording from a camera that I had discreetly installed in the bedroom. I checked on her every morning, more out of inertia than with any hope of seeing anything. But that day, I clicked play, and my heart skipped a beat. The video showed me sleeping. Everything is quiet and static. Until one moment. Until 3:42. Then, without turning on the lights, I appear in the frame. I get up, open closet, take out a box that wasn't there. I sit on the edge of the bed and lower my head. I've been sitting like this for almost 3 minutes. Then I get up, put the box back, and go to bed. I stared at it without blinking. I didn't remember anything like that. No box, no waking up. I rewound it. I looked again. The same movements. The same seconds. Everything is mechanical, precise, and without hesitation. I got up and went to the closet. He took out the box. An ordinary cardboard shoebox. It's not closed. Inside is a bunch of keys, a stack of old photos, a driver's license with a name I didn't know, and a piece of paper. There's an address on it. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? And say what? That I found things of unknown origin after I recorded myself wandering around the apartment with no memory? I just sat there and stared into the box. About 15 minutes. Without thoughts. Without feelings. And only then did I notice that one of the photos was my balcony. Taken from below, from afar at night. My curtains, my lamp, and there's a silhouette in the doorway. Human, not me, not now. Then, when I first moved in, before all this, that was the proof. I wasn't alone from the very beginning. I do not know how much time passed after that. A few hours, maybe a day. I turned off the phone. I closed all the windows, and just sat there, was listening. I listened to every sound. And all I could hear was my footsteps, because as it turned out, he was inside me. Or more precisely, he became me. I'm not talking about a split personality or anything clinical. No. I mean, when I was trying to figure out someone else's behavior, adjust to it, guess, predict, that's exactly what I started doing. I started moving just like him. Open doors the same way he does. Breathe the same way he does. I recorded myself every night, and more often I saw myself doing what he would do. It's like I'm just continuing his work now. Unknowingly, automatically, systematically. I no longer knew where I ended and where he began. In the last video I decided to watch, I'm lying on the bed. Sleep. The camera is writing. And suddenly, at some point, I open my eyes right into the lens. Not abruptly, calmly, quietly. I'm looking. A few seconds. Then I get up. I walk up to the camera, and before she turns off, I smile. I don't remember that, but I have no doubt that it was me. Since then, I haven't turned on the recordings anymore. I don't check where things are anymore. I don't mark where I put my keys. Everything has lost its meaning, because if you become what you were afraid of, then there is nowhere to run. There's no one to defend against. There's no one to fight. He doesn't go out at night anymore, because he doesn't need it anymore. Now I do everything myself. Effortlessly, without fear, without a doubt. I am the night steps, and maybe you're the next one to hear them. It always seemed to me that I lived in a world where reality was a fragile film, ready to burst from too loud a sound or sudden movement. As a child, I often woke up feeling like I was being watched. Not monsters under the bed or shadows in the corner. That would be too easy. No, I could feel his eyes, heavy and sticky, like the August air before a thunderstorm. Mom said it was just nightmares, but I knew something was wrong. One night when I was 9, I heard the creaking of floorboards in the hallway. My heart was pounding so loudly that I was afraid it would burst out of my chest. I froze, pulling the blanket up to my chin, and suddenly the door to my room slowly opened. No one, just a draft rustling the pages of an old photo album on the shelf. But then I didn't know that later, as a teenager, I would find in that album a picture that I shouldn't have seen, a man in a dark coat standing outside our house in 1983. His face was blurred, as if he was moving when the camera shutter clicked. Mom said it was a distant relative, but there was a falseness in her voice. Since then, I've started noticing coincidences. Car numbers that are repeated in different cities. People with identical scars on their left arms. The smell of smoke in rooms that have not been smoked for decades. I chalked it up to paranoia until I moved into an old cottage on the outskirts. Cheap, secluded, with a huge attic littered with boxes from previous tenants. The landlord who rented the house muttered something about urgent departure and do not disturb the rental agents. I didn't pay attention. Everything was quiet for the first week. I unpacked my things, painted the walls cream to hide the yellow streaks, and found strange things. Yellowed medical certificates without names, a broken watch frozen at 3:07, and a leather-bound diary. The pages were full of notes written in different handwriting. "They're not sleeping," read one. "He comes when the lights go out," says the second. I was laughing at myself, but at night, lying in bed, I heard footsteps in the attic. Heavy, measured, as if someone was walking back and forth, measuring the space. One day I decided to get up. The stairs creaked with every step, and there was a smell of dust and something sour, like old paint. The attic was empty, except for a pile of furniture under white sheets. But in the corner, behind the closet, I noticed a door. A small one, leading, apparently, into the wall. The lock was off, and when I pulled the handle, the door opened with a soft creak. There was a room behind it. It was small, windowless, with bare walls and a metal table in the middle. There was a folder on the table. There were photos inside. Dozens. Men, women, children. All with the same blurred faces as in the childhood photo. On the reverse side of the inscription, object number 12. The reaction to sound is aggression, object number 17. The escape attempt has been stopped. And dates. The same ones as in the diary. I went downstairs, trembling, but then the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. "You found a room," said the voice on the other end. Masculine, calm, like a doctor explaining a diagnosis. "Get out of the house. Right now." I hung up and ran to the front door, but it wouldn't open. The lock is jammed. Through the window, I saw a tall figure in a dark coat standing at the gate. The face is hidden under the hood. He was holding something shiny in his hand. A knife or a syringe? I locked myself in the bathroom and waited. The creaking of the floorboards became louder. The footsteps were getting closer. Then silence, and suddenly there was a knock on the door. Not outside, from inside the wall. Knock, knock, knock. It was like someone was scratching the plaster from the inside. I screamed, but the sound stuck in my throat. The next morning, I woke up on the bathroom floor. The door was open. There was a note on the kitchen table. "They always come back." And the signature is the same handwriting as in the diary. I haven't been able to sleep since. There are footsteps every night. Every day there are new items in the house. The keys that I didn't lose are on the table. Books open to pages with underlined paragraphs about mental disorders. Sometimes I catch my reflection in the mirror, and for a second it seems to me that the man in the coat is standing behind me. But when I turn around, there's no one. I found an envelope in my mailbox yesterday. Inside is a picture of me at my bedroom window. On the back, object number 23. Surveillance has begun. I squeezed the envelope in my hand so that the paper crumpled, leaving white lines on my palm. The photo fell to the floor, and I noticed that it had a date on it, yesterday. Someone was following me less than a day ago. I ran out into the street, looking around the street for at least some clue. A car with the engine running, a stranger's face in the window of a neighboring house. Nothing. Only the wind was blowing a fast food wrapper along the sidewalk, and a dog was barking in the distance. By evening, I decided to search the barn behind the house. The door creaked as if it hadn't been opened in years, although I remembered for sure that the owner had mentioned gardening tools. The interior smelled of rusty metal and damp. A rake with broken teeth hung on the wall, and an old refrigerator covered with rust stains stood in the corner. I pulled the handle, and the door opened with a hoarse creak. There was a box inside. There were tapes in it. The usual VHS tapes, each one neatly labeled, Surveillance 1 to 12. I found a video recorder in the living room, an ancient one with buttons stuck by dust, and inserted the first tape. The screen filled with snow, then an image appeared, black and white, shaking. The camera was in the corner of a room similar to mine, except the wallpaper was flowered. A woman was sitting on the bed. She was crying, clutching a pair of scissors in her hand. "They can hear me," she muttered, looking at the camera. Then she got up and walked out of the frame. The recording stopped. I moved on to the next tape. The man in the armchair was reading a newspaper. The camera flashed, and the same room appeared on the screen, but empty. Only there was something dark on the wall, perhaps a smudge. A minute later, the man returned, carrying a bottle of whiskey. He took a sip, put the bottle on the table. And then I noticed that the spot on the wall was moving. It crept down like a thick liquid until it reached the floor. The man fell to his knees, clutching his throat. Blood flowed from his mouth. I turned off the tape recorder. My hands were shaking. There was a knock on the door. 3 short strokes. I froze. The knock was repeated. It wasn't coming from the street, but from inside the house. From the basement. I didn't go down there. Instead, I grabbed the keys and ran to the car. The engine didn't start right away, and while I was waiting, looking in the rearview mirror, I saw the curtain on the second floor flutter. Someone was standing at the window. Not me. I went to the library. The old archivist, hunched over a file cabinet, helped to find documents about the previous owners of the house. There have been 7 of them in the last 30 years. Everyone is missing. One of them, a photographer who shot for the project, left behind an album. The one with the blurry face in the coat. When I got home, I found a glass of water in the kitchen. I didn't pour it. There was a note next to it. "You're taking too many pills." I haven't taken pills since I started finding envelopes. At night, the home phone rang. I didn't pick up the phone, but the answering machine came alive. "You can't leave. They are already everywhere." The voice was female, with a hoarseness like that of an old answering machine operator. In the morning, I discovered that all my things from the suitcase were neatly arranged in the closet. I didn't unpack them. There were traces of dirt on the bedroom floor, small, round, as if from crutches. They led to the attic door. I'm still here. I'm writing this, sitting at the kitchen table, and listening to the floorboards creak upstairs. Sometimes it seems that the steps repeat the rhythm of my heart. Yesterday, I bought a lock for the attic door. He wasn't there today. Only the scratches on the wood were too neat, as if they had been made with a key. There's another knock on the window. Not outside, from the courtyard side, where the old apple trees grow, the branches of which scratch the glass with the wind. But there's no wind right now. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass, trying to see what was outside the window. Twilight turned the garden into ink spots, but the apple trees stood out as black skeletons. Nothing. Only silence, broken only by my breathing. Then there was another knock. 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 Rhythmic, like a metronome. I stumbled back, knocking over my chair. The sound stopped. There was something metallic gleaming on the floor by the window. Scissors. The ones with the long blades that I bought for DIY, but never used. Now, they were lying in a puddle of water, although I definitely remembered that I had left them in a box on the shelf. Next to it is a piece of paper. "You're not the first." It was written in block letters. I ran outside, not feeling the cold. Snow had dusted the grass, and footprints were clearly visible on it. Not human. They were too narrow, with sharp edges, as if someone was dragging something heavy behind them. They led to the barn, but stopped at the door. Nothing had changed inside, except for one detail. There was now a photograph on the wall directly above the refrigerator. Taken this morning when I was washing the car. On the back, they are waiting. I locked all the windows and doors in the house and checked the locks 3 times. At midnight, the phone rang. The number was not determined. You shouldn't have gone through the archives, said the same female voice. Then the connection was interrupted. I grabbed a knife and checked every corner, but it was empty. Only in the bathroom was the mirror fogged up, even though the air was dry. Someone had drawn a smile on the glass with their finger. In the morning, I went to the neighbors. An old man who lives 2 houses down was sitting on the porch with a gun in his lap. "You'd better leave," he said, not looking at me. "What's going on here?" He shook his head. "This house. He's like a trap. People come and then..." The old man coughed. "Then they stay." I didn't listen. Instead, she went to the local administration, demanding documents for the house. The employee, a pale woman with dark circles under her eyes, silently took out a folder. The lease agreement, signatures, and a list of previous tenants. Everything is fake. The dates didn't match. The names were repeated. On the last page, someone had pasted a newspaper clipping, "Mysterious disappearance of a family in the suburbs." A snapshot of the house. My house. When I returned, I found the key in the mailbox. It was old, rusty, and labeled basement. I didn't remember having a basement, but the door in the kitchen floor, which I thought was a storage room, opened easily. The stairs led down into the darkness. I didn't come down. Instead, she threw the key into the sink. It was on the table this morning. I'm writing this now by the light of a lantern. The electricity was turned off an hour ago. There's someone knocking in the basement. Knock, knock, knock. It's like they're copying the rhythm of my heart. There's a childhood album on the table. That's the one. The picture with the blurred face disappeared. Instead, there's an empty frame. The knocking gets louder. I didn't light the candle. I didn't want to see my reflection in the window. I was afraid that the one in the coat would be standing behind me again. Instead, I sat on the floor, leaning against the refrigerator door, and stared into the darkness of the basement. The pounding stopped. Now all I could hear was my breathing and the soft hum of the wires behind the wall. Then a creak. Not floorboards. Doors. The one in the attic wall. I remembered the owner of the house muttering about, "Do not disturb the rental agents." Agents. Plural. I went to the police this morning. The officer, a young guy with acne on his cheeks, didn't even look up from his computer. "People don't just disappear," I said. 7 people in 30 years. He sighed. "Miss, this is the private sector. If tenants move out without warning, we don't keep records. And if they didn't move out..." He finally looked at me. "Have you seen the bodies? Blood?" I was silent. "Come back when you have something to report." On the way out, I ran into a woman in uniform. "Did you ask about Madison Street?" she asked without greeting me. I nodded. "You'd better leave. Today." "Why?" She pursed her lips. "Because you're already in the system." And she held out a business card. There was a phone number on it and the inscription, "Social Service, Department of Protection." At home, I called the number. Answering machine. "Welcome to the system. Your code is 237. I repeated the numbers, and the connection was cut. The van arrived an hour later. 2 men in blue overalls. Checking the gas equipment, they said. I wouldn't let him in. They drove away, leaving the box on the porch. Inside are my children's toys. The ones I left at my parents' house 10 years ago. At night, I went down to the basement again, with a flashlight. The stairs creaked, and there was a smell of earth and old paper. There was a file rack in the corner. Case number 23. My number. Inside there are photos of me in different places, at school, in a cafe, by the river. All with dates. The last one is yesterday. On the back, contact established. Then I heard a voice. No, not in my head. Behind the wall. Muffled. as if from underwater. "They won't stop," he said. "It's male, but not the one on the record." I pressed my ear to the concrete. "Who?" I whispered. "Those who are watching. Those who write it down." "What do they need?" "To keep you quiet, like the others." In the morning, I found a letter from the social service in my mailbox. "Your application has been reviewed. We recommend that you leave the premises before 1800 hours." I went out onto the porch. A car was parked at the curb. The man in the coat. He was holding a camera in his hand. The shutter clicked. I ran. I'm in an abandoned motel right now. I'm writing this to the sound of rain on the roof. There's a newspaper on the table. An article about a woman who disappeared last night. Her name is mine. The photo is mine. The date of the disappearance is today that I'm sitting on the edge of a sagging bed, staring at a newspaper headline. The paper smells damp, like everything in this motel. The walls are covered with spots that look like a map of an unknown country, and a fly buzzes from the ceiling, beating against a lamp. On the bedside table is a phone without a disc. The wire from it stretches to the outlet, but the handset is silent. I checked. The number 911 is not responding. I found an old mirror in the bathroom with cracks. When I touched the glass, it turned out to be warm, as if someone had just stood there. There were other people's things in the locker. A toothbrush with broken bristles, a razor with rust spots, a perfume bottle with an Elizabeth sticker. I do not know who she is. Going out into the hallway, I heard footsteps on the stairs. They were heavy, like a man in iron-top boots. But the receptionist, a hunched old man behind the counter, said I was the only one here. "Customers don't like this floor," he muttered, without looking up from a magazine, where all the pages had been torn out. "In room number 12, opposite mine, the door is ajar." I looked in. There were children's toys on the floor. The same ones that were sent in the box. A bear cub with a severed paw, a doll without a face, and a note, "They play when you sleep." I turned on the TV last night. The screen filled with snow. Then an image appeared, a black and white room similar to the one in the basement. There was a woman sitting in the corner. She looked directly into the camera and whispered, "Run." Then her face distorted, as if someone had erased the frame. There was a knock on the door this morning. 3 strokes. I didn't answer. There was snuffling outside the door. Then the sound of footsteps receded. There was a business card on the mat, social service. "Your supervisor is Mr. X." On the back is a drawing, a house, a tree, a man with crosses instead of eyes. I went out the window. The car was parked by the highway, but the keys were gone. I found an atlas in the glove compartment. All the pages with the state map were torn out. Only one remained, marked with a red marker, Zone 23. No entry allowed. I'm walking along the highway now. Not a single car is coming towards us. The sun is shining, but my shadow is falling in the wrong direction. There's a sign on the side of the road that says, "Welcome to Madison." Below it is a faded inscription, "They remember." I walked along the highway, counting my steps. The shadow behaved strangely. When the sun disappeared behind a cloud, it disappeared, but a clear silhouette remained on the asphalt, as if someone was standing nearby. I quickened my pace, feeling a lump of panic in my throat. A gas station appeared in the distance. It was old, with a faded shell sign and a cracked office window. A guy in a dirty t-shirt was sitting behind the counter, chewing gum. "Is the phone working?" I asked. He nodded at the phone on the wall. "It's a disc type with a broken cord. Intercity only." I dialed my mother's number. Beeps. Then a click. "Hi, it's me." I started, but there was laughter on the phone. The same female voice. "She's not coming." The connection was interrupted. The guy behind the counter grinned. "There's no network here." "But you already know, right?" I threw the money on the counter and ran out. There was a sign on the door, "Payment in cash only." Scrawled next to it, "They're watching." 2 kilometers later, I saw a bus stop. Schedule, flight to the city at 15:40. An hour ago, there was a newspaper on the bench. Today's one. An article about a missing policewoman. Her photo is the one that gave me the card. Then I heard the engine. Truck. An old one with a peeling cabin. The driver, a man in a cap, waved his hand. A ride. I shook my head. He shrugged and drove past. The number flashed in the rearview mirror. 23 mad. The sun was setting when I got to Madison. The streets were empty, as if the city had died out. There are surveillance cameras on every corner. There was a poster in the window of the closed store. Wanted, Ivanova LK. My face is mine. I went into a cafe. The waitress put the coffee in front of me, without looking at me. There was a yellow sediment floating in the cup. Have you seen? I began. She interrupted. Everyone here sees only what they are allowed to see. There's a clock on the wall. The hand showed 3:07. When I went outside, I came across a police patrol. 2 cops in bulletproof vests with machine guns. Documents, one of them barked. I handed over my driver's license. He grinned. Irina S., 23 years old. It should be Lydia K. The second cop took out handcuffs. You are under arrest for forgery of documents. I started running. They didn't shoot. They just laughed, watching me wander between houses. On the outskirts, near the old bridge, a car overtook me. A black sedan. A man in a coat got out of it, without a face. No, there was a face, but I couldn't remember it. It was as if the features were blurring at a glance. You're not leaving, he said. The voice sounded like an echo from a phone receiver. I stepped back to the edge of the bridge. Below is the river, black and oily. Who are you? I shouted. He took a camera out of his pocket. You know. And then I understood. The pictures in the album, the cassettes, the license plates are not coincidences. It's a system. They monitored, documented, and replaced people. My mother, the neighbor, the waitress, they were all part of it. I jumped. The water took me in like an embrace. The cold gripped my body, but I fought it. She floated out. A boy with a fishing rod stood on the shore. Are you from the 23rd house? He asked. I nodded. They'll find you. They always find it. I'm in an abandoned church right now. I am writing this by the light of the moon shining through the broken stained glass windows. In my pocket is the key to the basement. On the palm is the number 23, carved with a knife. I've always considered myself a person who doesn't believe in enchanted places. Even when friends at school whispered about the woods behind the old railway line, where people supposedly disappeared, it seemed to me that these were just horror stories. But everything changed when I found the diary in a paper bag by the side of the road. He was lying in the mud, pinned down by a stone, as if he had been deliberately left for someone to pick up. The pages were wrinkled from moisture, and the handwriting trembled, as if the writer was afraid of his own thoughts. The first record was dated 1998. A man named Tom wrote about getting lost in the woods while hiking with friends. They argued about where to go until they split up. His last lines sounded like a deathbed confession. They didn't scream. I only heard footsteps. A lot of steps. But when I turned around, there was no one. And then the earth sighed. Then there were only incoherent scribbles. This diary has become an obsession. I started collecting stories about the missing in those parts. The bartender at the diner by the highway, an old man with a face lined like bark, told how his brother, a hunter, once returned home unconscious. He was found by a stream, clutching a branch with human hair in his hand. The doctors talked about mental confusion, but my brother kept repeating until his death, "They don't want us to leave." A month later, I was standing on the edge of that very forest. In the backpack, there is a map, a flashlight, a voice recorder, and a pistol, which I bought in case of wild animals. But the animals didn't scare me. The silence scared me. The forest seemed to hold its breath. The trees grew too close to each other, their roots intertwined like veins. Every step echoed, as if someone was repeating my movements underground. On the second day, I came across a hut. The walls were askew, the windows boarded up, but the interior smelled of fresh wood. Someone recently repaired it. There were empty cans on the floor, and the words, "Do not light a fire at night," were written in charcoal on the wall. I ignored the warning. When it got dark, I lit a campfire and turned on the recorder to record the sounds of the forest. An hour later, I heard the first scream. It came from far away, sharp and piercing, as if the man was screaming and crying at the same time. I grabbed a flashlight and a pistol, but as soon as I took a step into the darkness, the scream stopped. And then something started that couldn't be explained. The ground shook underfoot, and the trees stirred, even though there was no wind. The headphones on the recorder, which I had forgotten to turn off, hissed as if the tape was filled with white noise. And in that hiss, I could make out a voice. "Go away. They can hear you." I started to run, but the path had disappeared. Instead, there was a wall of fir trees, their roots arching like snakes. The lantern flickered and went out. In total darkness, I fell. My hand bumped into something soft. It was a man, or what's left of it. The skin stretched over the bones, the eyes were missing, but the fingers were still clutching the notebook. On the first page it was written, "They are not human. They're what's left when people break down." I don't remember how I got out. I woke up next to the road in the morning with a notebook and a cassette in my hands. They told me at the police station that no one had been missing in the woods for 10 years. But when I put the tape in the tape recorder, it wasn't my recordings. 3 months have passed since then. I'm back in the city, but the forest won't let me go. At night, I hear footsteps outside the door. Not hurried, not slow, but measured, as if someone was following my trail. The police found no hut, no body, no records. But I know they're there. Sometimes when I open my notebook, new inscriptions appear between the lines. "They come for those who know," reads the last one. "Yesterday, I went to the forest again. Not out of curiosity, but because of the sounds. The phone picks up strange interference, as if the signal is being blocked. But when I played the tape through the speakers of the car, the forest responded. The trees swayed, although the air was still, and in the distance there was a howl. Not a wolf, not a human. It was as if something huge, consisting of thousands of voices, was shouting in unison. I'm not coming back. Not because I'm afraid, because I feel like they're already here. Yesterday, in the bathroom mirror, I noticed a shadow behind my back. She wasn't reflected in the glass. She just stood there, and her outline resembled a tangle of roots. And this morning, a neighbor from the 3rd floor asked why I no longer go to work. I hadn't seen her for a week, but she was smiling, and her teeth were in the ground. The neighbor with the dirt on her teeth disappeared. Or rather, it was taken out. The next morning, I heard paramedics in black gloves loading a stretcher covered with a sheet into the car. The tip of her finger was sticking out. The nail was broken off. There was dirt under it. I wanted to go downstairs and ask what happened, but I bumped into a man in a dark raincoat at the door. He didn't introduce himself, just shoved a summons into my hands. "You are required to report to the Department of Internal Affairs tomorrow at 8 o'clock. The signature is illegible, like the roots of those trees. The station smelled of cheap coffee and fear. The investigator, a plump man with a face like wet clay, placed a folder in front of me. There were photos inside. My car is at the edge of the forest. I'm sleeping in an armchair with a notebook on my lap. Even the shots from my bathroom, where the mirror reflects only an empty room. You're under surveillance, Mr. Kelly," he said, not looking at me. "You have been watched since your visit to the forest. But not us." He turned on the recorder. It made a noise, like that night at the campfire. Then there was a creaking sound, as if someone was dragging something heavy on gravel. And the voice. My voice, but distorted, as if it were speaking from underwater. "They're here. They've always been here." The investigator turned off the recording. "Isn't that you?" he asked. I was silent. Then he threw a key on the table. "You'd better leave, or at least stop going into the woods." I didn't listen. It started raining again at night, big drops hitting the glass like fingers. I was sitting in the kitchen, rereading my notebook. New entries appeared on the page that I definitely left blank. They are building something. Underground. Below is a diagram. Circles, intersecting lines, crosses in the center. It looks like tunnels. Or graves. There was a knock on the door. A woman in a wet raincoat stood in the doorway. Her hair was plastered to her face, and her eyes glittered like an animal's in the headlights. "Are you looking for the truth?" "What is it?" she asked without waiting for an invitation to enter. "Then listen up. The forest is not a place. It's a trap. Those who have disappeared, their bodies are just shells. What's inside them stays there to wait for the next ones." She threw a flash drive on the table. "Your trip to the police station. What the cameras didn't show." The flash drive contained a video. I was leaving the building, and a shadow was following me. Not mine. She moved unnaturally, as if her limbs were folded in the opposite direction. But the worst part was that I recognized that gait. Tom from a diary walked in the same way, jerkily, as if his feet were rooted to the ground. The woman disappeared, leaving the smell of wet earth. I couldn't find her in the database, and she wasn't listed among the city's residents either. But the next day, I read in the newspaper, the body of an unknown woman was found by the river. The cause of death was exposure to water for many years. Photos of her face were not published. I am currently writing this in the basement of a library in the archival documents department. I found a map of the area from 1947. The forest was half the size then, and in place of the hut is a cross. There is an inscription next to it. The remains of 12 workers who died during the construction of the railway line are buried here. The cause of death has not been determined. But that's not the worst part. The scariest thing is that I can smell the earth. Not just dampness, the one from the grave. And it comes from my hands. The smell of earth became stronger. Not like after the rain, not like in the woods. It's like being in a crypt. I scratched my skin with my nails until it bled, but it didn't disappear. At work, my colleague shied away when I passed by. "It's like you came out of the grave," Martha, the secretary, said, and didn't look into his eyes anymore. I started wearing gloves, but even under them, my palms itched as if maggots were moving under my skin. I found photos from 1947 in the archive. Workers on the background of an unfinished railway. Their faces are ash gray. They're all wearing the same overalls, and they're all looking at the camera, except for one. He stands to the side, his face blurred, as if he was moving during the shooting. And on his chest is a badge with the name Tom. An old man came in the evening. I didn't hear him enter the apartment. I just opened my eyes, and he was sitting in an armchair, holding my notes in his hands. "Are you looking for answers?" "What is it?" he asked, not looking at me. "What if the answer is you?" His voice sounded like the creak of unoiled gears. Those who built the road saw something in the ground, something that made them dig deeper. But they didn't realize that they were digging inwards, not downwards. He got up, and I noticed that his shoes were dry, even though it was raining outside. They're still digging. Through those who come. The old man was gone in the morning. Only on the table there was a medallion with the inscription, 12. Inside is a photo of a woman with a face similar to the one who came earlier. On the back is an inscription, "They don't die. They're coming back." I went to the river, where they found the body of an unknown woman. The shore was empty, except for the police tape fluttering in the wind. I found a hole under the rocks by the water. Not fresh, its edges are overgrown with moss. Inside were bones intertwined with roots. And among them is my notebook, the pages of which were covered with my handwriting, but dated 1947. I returned home in the rain. In the hallway mirror, I saw that my hair had turned gray. They didn't turn gray, as if they were covered with ashes. And black dots appeared on his forehead, like seeds embedded in his skin. The doorbell rang at night. I didn't open it, but there was a newspaper on the mat this morning. An article about strange finds in the forest. The remains of a man who disappeared in 1947 were discovered 2 miles from the railway. There are no signs of violent death, but the body has been preserved too well. I stopped recognizing my reflection. Not immediately, but first the little things. The eyebrow is raised higher than usual. The lip crease is deeper. Then the hands. The skin on his fingers became rough, like bark, and his nails darkened, like those of a corpse that had lain in water for a long time. I bought gloves, but they were tearing, clinging to something inside me as if thorns were growing under my skin. In the library, the archivist, a gaunt man with a face like parchment, whispered to me, "You are not the first to seek the truth about the forest. The previous researcher left a diary. Would you like to?" He held out a battered notebook. The date on the first page was yesterday. Last entry, "They're changing you. Not externally, but internally. First the itching, then the voices. Then you realize that you haven't eaten in a long time, and you don't want to." I ran out, but I burned the notebook in the sink. The paper burned with a green flame, and the ashes gathered in a pattern similar to a forest map. The plumber came in at night. I didn't call him, but he knocked on the door, saying that the neighbor downstairs was complaining about a leak. The apartment was dry, but I let him in. He examined the pipes, muttering, "Old houses, they have roots in them." Then he froze, looking at my hands. "Have you been to the doctor for a long time?" he asked. I didn't answer. He left, but left the wrench on the table. There were scratches on the metal, as if someone had tried to saw through it with their nails. In the morning, I discovered in the bathroom that the tap water was flowing black. Not dirty, but dark like oil. She didn't get her hands dirty, but she left a smell of decay. When I drained it, there was a film left in the sink that looked like shed skin. In the evening, my mother called. Her voice was trembling. "Uncle Ed is my father's brother, who disappeared in that forest 30 years ago. He came today," she said. "He hasn't changed at all. Just the eyes like a dead man's." I went to see her. The house was empty. The mother was lying on the kitchen floor, her face covered with the same black film that remained in the sink. Uncle Ed was standing next to her. His skin was gray like an old tree, and his fingers ended in claws. "You knew we were coming," he croaked. "You felt the ground." I was running. The car wouldn't start, but when I hit the steering wheel with my fist, the engine came to life with a roar like the howl of an animal. In the rear-view mirror, Uncle Ed was standing on the road, waving his arms like branches in the wind. Now I'm in a motel on the outskirts of town. The walls are thin here, and you can hear your neighbor pacing back and forth all night. His footsteps are heavy and wet. Sometimes he stops at my door. I know it's not human. Not because I believe in evil spirits. Because I saw his footprints in the hallway. Dirt mixed with something dark, and handprints with 6 fingers. The motel smells of rust and old carpet. I'm sitting on the bed with my back against the wall, counting the steps outside the door. Step, pause, step. It's like someone is dragging something heavy. Sometimes there is a slurping sound as if the soles stick to the floor. In the morning, the tracks disappeared. There are only worn streaks on the carpet in the hallway, as if they were wiped off with a wet cloth. But there was a clump of hair stuck in the vent above the door, dark with earth at the tips. I went out into the city. People shied away as if from a leper. Even the homeless man at the station, who usually asks for change, was groping on the ground with a stick without looking up. "You're not one of ours," he muttered. His feet were bare, and there were clumps of black dirt between his toes. At the hospital, doctors found nothing but stress. But the nurse who was giving the injection dropped the syringe. "I'm sorry," she whispered, looking at my hand. "I thought you moved." Her pupils dilated, like someone who sees something behind my back. He did not return home. I took a room in another motel under an assumed name. The doorbell rang at night. I didn't open it, but I found a note under the crack. "We know where you sleep." The letters are cut out of newspapers like in old kidnapping stories. In the morning, in the bathroom, I discovered that my teeth were loose. They don't hurt, they just sway like rotten pillars. When I tried to pull one out, a black liquid flowed out of the gum, similar to the one in the sink. There were stains on the mirror that could not be washed off with water. The maid came in the evening. She knocked, demanding to get out. I was silent. Then she came in by herself. Her face resembled a wax mask, smooth, without a single wrinkle. "You have to leave," she said, without moving her lips. "They can smell it." She had the key to my room in her hand. Not a plastic card, but an old iron key with the number 12. I ran out the window. The car was parked in the parking lot, but the engine wouldn't start. Then I went on foot. On the way, I saw a phone booth. The glass was cracked, but the tube was working. I dialed 911, but instead of beeping, I heard a whisper. Soon. Very soon. Now I'm on the bus. Next to it is an old woman with a basket full of earth. She smiles, showing gums without teeth. You smell like them, she says. Her nails are long and dirty, and there are pieces of my skin under them. The bus stopped at an empty station. The people went out, but the old woman with the basket of earth remained. You're not leaving here, she said, and I realized the bus wasn't going anywhere. We were standing in place all the time, and the landscape outside the window, the forest, the road, the river, was painted on the screen. The driver, his face hidden under his cap, handed me the ticket. It read, Final stop, the 12th mile. I went out. There's that forest all around. The trees were moving, though there was no wind. The roots crawled out of the ground like veins pulsing under the skin. I followed a path that I couldn't see, but I could feel it under my feet. My skin turned gray, and my nails fell off, revealing black claws. The ground beneath me was sighing. There was a hut at the edge of the clearing. The boards on the windows were rotten, and the interior smelled of fresh blood. On the table is my diary, filled to the last page. Last entry. I found them. They are me. There was a skeleton in the corner. His bones were intertwined with the roots, and mushrooms grew in his eye sockets. Next to it is a medallion with the number 12. I put it around my neck, and at the same moment the ground parted. Beneath it was a network of tunnels dug into the flesh. The walls breathed, contracting like muscles. You've come, the voices whispered. There were 12 of them. Men, women, old people, all with my face. They held out their hands, and I could see their skin melting, exposing the tree bark underneath. We've been waiting for you, they said. You're the last one. I didn't resist. When their fingers touched my skin, I felt my body disintegrate into fibers as bones turn into roots. It didn't hurt, just silence, sweet as the earth after the rain. I'm here now, down below. We weave threads that reach to the surface, to new victims. We are a trap that feeds on fear. We are what remains when people break down. Sometimes I hear footsteps overhead. Someone screams, but it doesn't matter. It's important that the next one is already underway. He can smell it. He's looking for the truth. And you, those who are reading this, how will you feel when the ground beneath your feet sighs in response? A question for the audience. We believe that horror hides in the dark, but what if it grows inside us, slowly like roots underground? Are we able to distinguish our own madness from reality, or are they the same thing? And if evil is not a force, but a void that we fill with our fears, will the forest ever become full? It started with ventilation. Not from her sounds, they always buzzed here like tired bees, but from the smell. Sweet, chemical, as if someone had dissolved plastic in boiling water. I noticed it for the first time in September, when I stayed after school to check the tests. The biology classroom was empty, but the air was thick, like before a thunderstorm. I opened the window, but the smell didn't go away. It's embedded in the walls. A week later, Emily disappeared. A girl from the 8th grade, quiet, with a face always pale as chalk. Her desk was found empty in math class, and her textbook was open to a page with a problem about speed and distance. There was a pen nearby, dried out, as if it hadn't been used in years. The cameras in the hallway showed her walking towards the stairs leading to the basement and disappearing into the doorway. The director said she probably ran away. Her mother was crying into the phone. She wouldn't have left without the cat. And then I heard a whisper. Not the voices, but rather the vibration. It was as if someone had run their finger over the glass of the ventilation grate. I climbed up on the table and shone my flashlight down the shaft. Dust, rusty bolts, and a piece of paper stuck to the metal. It was a piece of paper from Emily's notebook. Don't go there. It was written in blue ink, and below it was a ventilation diagram with crosses on the corners. I went down to the basement. It took a while, but at first I stood at the door with the sign, Technical Room, listening to something bubbling inside, like water in old pipes. The smell was sharp and pungent. There are brown streaks on the walls, as if blood has been mixed with rust. And pipes. Dozens of pipes intertwined, like snakes. There are fresh scratches on one of them, as if someone tried to open the metal with their nails. I found her backpack in the corner. Inside were a pack of old textbooks, a withered apple, and a diary. The pages smelled of bleach. Last entry. They make me write this. They say I'm next. They live here, in the air. The next day, Lucy, a student from a chemistry club, came up to me. His face was stained red, and his hair was matted with sweat. "You have to stop looking for her," she whispered, clutching a tube of yellow liquid in her hands. "They're watching you." "They." She coughed, and blood began to flow from her nose. I took her to the infirmary, but the nurse said that Lucy wasn't there. That night, I returned to the basement with a flashlight. The trumpets were humming louder, and in their rhythm could be heard the Morse code, "Go away." But I moved on. I found a hatch behind a pile of boxes marked for disposal. Padlocked, covered in the same brown goo. Next to it is a stack of documents. Invoices for the supply of chemical reagents, signed by the director. The dates went up to today. And then I realized, the school has not been heated since August. But the ventilation was working smoothly. I came out of the basement clutching the invoice in my hand. Benzylate chloride, 500 liters. For sanitation of premises. The director's signature trembled under the text, as if he was afraid to put it on. There was a dim light in the hallway. The bulbs were blinking, as if they were winking at me. I was walking past classrooms where there were still students on extended leave, and I could hear their laughter breaking into coughs. The next day, Lucy did not come to school. Her desk was empty, and on the chair was the same tube with the yellow liquid. I put it in my pocket, but at lunchtime, I discovered that the test tube was gone. Instead, there was a note in his pocket. "They're everywhere. Run away." The handwriting was similar to Emily's. Then I went to the caretaker, Mr. Grave. The old man worked here for 30 years, knew every corner of the school. His office smelled of mold and floor oil. "These pipes," I asked, "do they lead somewhere outside the territory?" He froze, wiping a wrench with a rag. "No," he said, not looking at me. "They end in the basement." But his hands were shaking. In the evening, I went down to the basement again, this time with a camera. I took off the hatch, pipes, and stains on walls. When I developed the pictures, I saw that on one of them there was a shadow behind the boxes, sharp, angular, too straight for a human. Like the outline of a closet, but there were no cabinets there. And then Mr. Grave disappeared. His tools were left scattered by the basement door, and on the wall was an inscription painted in motor oil. "They pay us for silence." I started noticing the details. Students who coughed, wheezed, lost consciousness in class. The nurse was handing out inhalers like candy. The director smiled at the meetings, saying that it was allergic to autumn. But his office smelled of the same sweet chemical smoke. One night, I returned to school with a crowbar, knocked out the lock on the hatch. Inside was not a shaft, but a room. It was small, with concrete walls, and a floor strewn with broken glass. There are graffiti on the walls. "Save us. They're killing. Don't breathe." There was a rusty chair in the middle of the room, and on it was a child's backpack. "Emily." And then I heard footsteps. Not in the ventilation, but behind the door. Heavy, slow. Someone was scratching the metal with their nails. I turned off the flashlight, but lights flashed in the darkness. Dozens of red dots, like the eyes of cameras. They were coming towards me, crawling along the walls, the ceiling. These were motion sensors. "You shouldn't have come here," came a voice from the speaker. The director's voice that I froze in the dark as the red dots of the sensors crept towards me. The speaker hissed again. "We could be friends, Mr. Cole." The director's voice sounded like the creak of unoiled gears. "You've seen the documents. You know what we do here at night, but you don't know why." At that moment, there was a sound of footsteps in the corridor outside the door. Not footsteps, but as if someone was dragging a heavy bag. I pressed myself against the wall, feeling the glass shards dig into the soles of my feet. The door creaked, and light filtered through the crack. The shadow on the wall, broad and hunched, moved. Someone was muttering, "He's here, he's here, he's here." I recognized the voice. It was Sam, the janitor who had worked here the longest. The one who always smiled, swinging a mop like a sword. "Sam," I whispered. The shadow froze. Then there was laughter, wet and bubbling. "They gave me the keys," Sam said, "to open the hatches for people like you." I rushed to the exit, but the door slammed shut. The smell of chemicals became unbearable. My throat burned as if I had swallowed acid. A lamp flashed on the wall, illuminating graffiti, "They sell our air." In the morning, I went to the city library. The archivist, an old woman with a face lined like bark, took out a folder of newspaper clippings for me. Ridgefield Times, 1987. School explosion. 3 dead. The reason is a gas leak. But in the corner of the article in small print, the parents of the dead students have sued the Clean Air Company. They hushed up the case, the archivist said, leaning toward me. The school then stood on the site of an old pesticide factory. The soil has not been cleared. When I returned, I found Lucy. She was sitting on the roof of the gym, hugging her knees. Her hair was dyed black, and there were fresh cuts on her arms. "They make us breathe it in," she said, not looking at me, "so that we can't leave, so that we forget." Who are they? Those who bought the land, those who pay the director, those who send trucks at night. She nodded at my pocket. There was a test tube with a yellow liquid in it, the one I took from a basement. That night, I woke up to the sound of siren, not from school, but far away, as if from another world. Looking out the window, I saw a line of trucks with the Clean Air logo crawling past the school. Their bodies were covered with tarpaulins, but the same sweet smell oozed out from under the fabric that I started noticing a man in a black jacket. He stood outside the school every morning, leaning against a telephone pole, and watched the students enter the building. His face is hidden under a hood. His hands are in gloves, even when it's +20 outside. When I passed by, he abruptly turned away, as if studying the clouds. One night, while checking classes, I came across his trail. There was a wet shoe print on the floor by the window, and next to it was a stopper from a bottle labeled for cleaning glasses. The smell was familiar, the same sweet smoke from the ventilation. Lucy didn't show up for class this morning. Her mother said that her daughter had fallen asleep in the bathtub and had not woken up for 2 days. "The doctors can't figure out what's wrong with her," she cried into the phone. I went to the hospital. Lucy was lying in the room with tubes in her veins. Her breathing was slow, like a sleeping child. But there was her phone on the bedside table. Last message, a photo of a man in a black jacket taken from the window of her house. Caption, "He's here." At school, I searched the basement. Behind a pile of boxes labeled chemistry, I found a door disguised as a wall. The smell was pungent and suffocating. Inside is a room with rows of glass jars filled with yellow liquid. There are syringes, masks, and bundles of documents stamped Clean Air on the shelves. And a diary. "They don't understand," wrote the unknown. "I'm saving them. The earth is poisoned, the air is killing. I give them sleep so they don't suffer. They will become part of something bigger." On the next page is a list of names: Emily, Sam, Lucy. Next to each one is the date and time. Today's date was circled in red. I ran out into the hallway, but bumped into him. A man in a black jacket was standing by the stairs, holding a syringe in his hand. His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes. "You shouldn't have searched," he said, and his voice sounded like the rustle of dry leaves. "It's a mercy. You've seen the documents. They're all going to die of cancer. I'm just speeding up the inevitable." He took a step towards me. I backed away, but tripped over a hose from scrubbing machine. He bent down, and the syringe flashed in the lamplight. "Don't be afraid. It's painless. You will fall asleep, and I will carry you to a safe place, where there is no poison." At that moment, the light in the hallway turned on. The man froze. "They're already here," he whispered, looking past me. I turned around. The director was standing at the entrance to the basement with 2 guards. They were carrying pistols with long barrels that looked like syringes. "Mr. Cole," the director said, smiling, "you've ruined everything." I asked, looking at the syringe in the man's hand. The director laughed. "Mr. Cole, you're confusing good with evil. This man," he nodded at the man in the jacket, "is a former clean air engineer. He knows too much about what we're pumping into the ventilation system, and he's trying to help the children, in my own way." The man in black abruptly raised the syringe. "You're killing them. First the soil, then the air, now these injections. You're turning the school into a sleep factory." The guards stepped forward. The director raised his hand. "Don't be dramatic. We are only protecting investments. The land under the school is ours. And as long as parents pay for wellness programs, we will provide them with peace of mind. In the form of tablets. In the form of clean air. In the form of..." He nodded at the syringe. I backed away. "You're poisoning them. Sam, Emily, Lucy. They're losers," the director shrugged. "Their bodies couldn't take the dose. But you, Mr. Cole, you could be a part of the project. You see, we need someone who knows how to convince. Parents trust teachers." The man in the black jacket suddenly rushed to the exit. The guard fired. The syringe in his hand blew out a cloud of yellow mist. The man screamed, clutching his face, and collapsed to the floor. The director sighed. "It's a pity. He was a good engineer." I was running. I don't remember how I ended up at the gym. I was being chased. I heard footsteps, shouts. "He knows about the trucks." The gym was locked, but the window in the locker room was open. I climbed out, cutting my hand on the glass, and ran to the woods behind the school. There I came across a hut. Inside there are mountains of cans labeled clean air, marked maps and photographs of students. And a diary. Another handwriting, female. They use the gym as a warehouse. The trucks arrive at night. The children are just a cover. We need to find someone who can tell the world. The last entry was today. He came. "Teacher, Cole." The door creaked behind him. I turned around. Lucy was standing in the doorway. No tubes, no sleepy eyes. "You still don't understand," she said. "It's not them. It's us. We inhale poison to survive, to become stronger. There is no choice. Tomorrow you will come to school and tell me that I am dead. Or join us." In the morning, I returned to school, hiding my cut hand under my sleeve. Lucy was sitting at her desk, doodling on a notepad. Her eyes were clear, and her voice was clear. "Good morning, Mr. Cole." It's like nothing happened yesterday. There was a fresh report on the director's desk. The sanitary inspection was successful. All ventilation systems comply with the standards. He smiled at me through the glass of his office, lifting his coffee mug. I found traces of blood in the locker room, mine, but the floor was clean to a shine. There was a new sign on the door of Lucy's locker. "She's alive." The red paint ran down the metal like rust. At lunchtime, a nurse came up to me. "You need to check your blood pressure," she said, holding out the pills. "You look tired." I asked what was wrong with Lucy. "I checked out this morning. A wonderful recovery, right?" After school, I went to Emily's mother's house. Her house smelled of mold and old newspapers. She came back at night, the woman said, looking at the floor. She said she was out with friends. But her cat is missing. There was a picture of Emily holding a cat on the wall. On the back is the inscription, "Don't trust them." I found Sam at the gym. He was mopping the floor, humming a children's song. "Have you seen Lucy?" He froze. The mop fell out of his hands. "She's dead," he whispered. "They're all dead." Then he smiled and added, "But they'll be back soon." In the evening, I received a letter in the school mail. The video file. The recording shows yesterday's scene in the basement, but the editing was changed. It seemed like I was attacking the director, and the man in black was defending himself. At the end is the text, "Are you sure you remember everything correctly?" The next day, a pipe burst in the classroom. Instead of water, yellow liquid gushed out of it, smelling of chlorine. The children were screaming, gasping for breath, but Lucy stood still, looking at me. "You're not leaving anyway," she whispered as the others ran for the exit. "You're already a part of it." I ran to the director's office. The door was open. A man in a black jacket was sitting inside, alive, with a bandaged face. "You don't understand," he said, not looking at me. "It's not poisoning. It's a medicine. We give them immunity. And you're just a teacher." Sirens began to wail outside the window. The police arrived. I was arrested for assaulting the director. At the station, the sergeant put a photograph on the table. "Is this your car?" The picture shows my trunk full of cans labeled clean air. I was sitting in my cell, staring at a crack in the wall. The police didn't believe my stories about clean air. "You found the cans in your trunk yourself," the sergeant said. "Maybe you drove trucks at night, too?" But then the police station's door swung open. 3 teenage students from my class entered. Derek, the captain of the football team, was holding a folder in his hands. Molly, a quiet girl with a camera, was biting her lip. And Tyler, the hacker who hacked into the school's server last year. "We know where the truth is," Derek said. "Lucy told us." They brought the evidence. Photos of clean air trucks surreptitiously removing barrels of toxic waste behind the school. A video of the director handing envelopes with money to Mr. Grave. And the diary of Emily, who everyone thought was missing, but who, as it turned out, lived in an abandoned house near the forest, collecting evidence. "She said you're the only one who can help." Molly handed me the photo. "But if you don't get out of here, they'll kill us all." It was Lucy in the picture. Alive, laughing, surrounded by children from the chemistry club. On the back is an inscription. "They are in the gym, under the floor." I was released on bail, thanks to a mistake in the paperwork, as the sergeant muttered. That night we met at Emily's abandoned house. She was sitting on the floor, surrounded by maps and test tubes. "They don't want to kill us," she said. "They want us to keep quiet." But I found my father's notes. He worked for Clean Air. They don't just pump poison into the ventilation. They feed us with it, to get us used to it, so they couldn't leave. Tyler hacked the school server. Files flashed across the screen. Adaptation program, dosage for 8th grade, evacuation lists. "They're getting ready for something big," he whispered. "An inspection is coming here next month. They want to show that school is an ideal place, and those who know the truth. They'll take it away," Derek finished. In the morning, we broke into the gym. The floor was freshly scrubbed, but we found pipes under the floorboards where the cabinets once stood. Not ventilation, old, rusty, with valves connected to trucks. And the boxes. Hundreds of boxes with cans of clean air. "They don't filter the air," Emily said. "They recycle it. Children are living filters. We inhale the poison and they collect it." At that moment, the alarm went off. The gym door swung open. A man in a black jacket stood in the doorway. "There's a syringe in my hand. That's why I wanted to put you to sleep," he said. "You don't understand. It's the only way to survive. The journalists will arrive tomorrow. And you'll ruin everything." I woke up to the sound of glass hitting the floor. Lucy was standing in the bedroom window. Her face was pale, and her hair was plastered to her neck with sweat. "They know you're helping me," she whispered. "You need to leave." I let her in. She was shivering, not from the cold, but from fear. "Why are you?" I asked. "Why exactly did you come to me?" She paused at the door. "Because you're the only one who doesn't look at me like I'm a corpse. Because..." She turned away, but I managed to see the tears. We spent the night sorting through the documents. Her hand accidentally touched mine, and I felt her shudder. "You must hate me," she said, "after everything I've done." "It's not your fault. You were sick. They made us all sick." She laughed bitterly, joylessly. "That's not the point. I saw the way you were looking at Emily. You feel sorry for her. And I'm just a monster." In the morning, I found her sleeping on the couch. Her hair was spread out on the pillow, and there were needle marks on her neck. I covered her with a blanket, but she woke up. "Don't do this," she whispered. don't pretend that you care. At school, Emily was waiting for me at the office. Did you sleep with her? She asked without preamble. Her eyes were burning. She's using you. How she used me? What are you talking about? She's in love with you. Do you think it's an accident that her father worked for Clean Air? She knows that you will do anything to protect her. And then she'll tell the truth, and you will become just like them. In the evening, Lucy disappeared. There was a note on my desk. I'm sorry. I can't lie anymore. And a flash drive. It shows a video of Lucy and the director in the office. He doesn't know what I'm filming, she whispers to the camera. But I have to. He says he loves me, that we can be together when it's over. I watched the video until the end. Lucy and the director are in his office. Are you sure you want to do this? He asks, stroking her hair. Yes, she whispers. I'm tired of running. Let them think I'm dead. Let him think I'm dead. She kisses him, not like a daughter, not as a victim, as an accomplice. I found her at the gym. She was standing on the edge of a diving tower above an empty pool. There's a syringe in my hand. Did you see everything? She asked without turning around. You used me. You wanted to be used yourself. You loved me. Love is always manipulation, Mr. Cole. She took a step forward. I'm sorry. I can't pretend anymore. Lucy, no. But she had already jumped. Not down, but to the side. On the floor of the pool, where the glass fragments from the broken pipe lay. Her blood mixed with the yellow slime, spreading across the concrete like a watercolor. I went down to her. She was still breathing. Why? I asked. And, because it's the only way to win, she whispered. Now you're going to tell everyone. Tell them that I died because of them. And they will blame themselves. The last breath. Her eyes remained open, staring at the ceiling where the chandelier once hung. In the morning, the school declared mourning. The director cried at the meeting, talking about a tragic accident. Her diary was in my pocket. Last entry, he will believe in my death. He has to believe. And there was a surprise waiting for me on the roof of the gym, where I went up at night. Dozens of cans of clean air, arranged in the shape of a heart. And a note. Thank you for helping me disappear. Lucy. I can still hear her laughter in the ventilation. But now I know it's not a hallucination. It's her. Lively. Somewhere out there, outside the school that we destroyed. And afterward, for those who have watched to the end. Are you still breathing? Good. Bad. I don't know. If you hear a whisper in the vent, it's not Lucy. It's you. You're already part of the system, even if you haven't inhaled their poison. You ask questions, you look for answers, you look at the screens. And they're looking at you. Do you think this is the end? This is just the beginning. School is just a small piece of the puzzle. Tomorrow you will go to work, breathe in the air conditioner, drink water from the cooler, and you'll be thinking, what if? Don't look for Lucy. She's everywhere. In every message that you ignore. In every contract that you sign. In every case, it's okay, is when you're screaming inside that it's wrong. And when the ventilation turns on at night, listen. There's someone there. There always is. P.S. Turn off the sound. Immediately. They don't have to know what you're hearing. My life changed the day I found an old diary in the basement of my house, which I bought at auction. The house was dilapidated, the walls were covered with cracks, and the air smelled of mold and mustiness. I didn't know that this place holds secrets that shouldn't have been revealed. The basement was silent, with only the echo of footsteps bouncing off the concrete walls. I stood with a flashlight in my hand, illuminating dusty crates and old boxes. Something glinted in the corner. It was a rusty chest, locked with a long, broken lock. When I opened it, there was a battered leather diary and some old newspaper articles inside. The newspapers dated back to the 1980s. The headlines talked about a serial killer hunting in the neighborhood. The Gray Man, as he was called in the news, disappeared without a trace after the authorities closed the case. But there were other entries in the diary. details that were not in the press. He came at night, I read, wearing a gray cloth mask. His voice sounded like it was coming through cotton wool. He talked about the missing people, about those who did not return home. I saw his eyes. They were empty like black holes. Suddenly I froze. It got cold in the basement. The flashlight in his hand wavered, and the light fell on the wall behind the chest. There, on the damp concrete surface, were names scrawled, the same names that had been mentioned in the newspapers. Someone has been here recently. I tried to leave, but the basement door slammed shut. The lock clicked, and I realized I wasn't alone. There was a whisper in the darkness, like sounds from a diary. You found something you shouldn't have found. From that moment on, the nightmare began. Now I can't sleep. Every night I hear footsteps overhead, the creak of floorboards, as if someone is slowly walking around the house. But during the day, everything seems normal, until I notice new inscriptions on the walls, new names added to the list in the basement. One morning, I discovered that my car had been moved across the street, as if someone had moved it overnight. There was a piece of paper in the glove compartment that read, "You're next." My hand was shaking when I threw it in the trash, but a minute later, I found the same piece of paper in the refrigerator. I started avoiding the house, but I couldn't escape. People began to disappear in the city, the same ones whose names were in the basement. The police didn't believe me when I showed them the diary. "These are old cases," they said. But I saw how last night, driving past a forest outside the city, I noticed a figure in a gray mask standing on the side of the road. She was waving her hand like she'd had an accident, but as I approached, she disappeared. I found a bunch of photos in my mailbox this morning. They showed pictures of my house taken at night. A shadow in a mask flickered in the frame. On the back of the last photo was written, "You found my house. This is your home now." I can't wait any longer. A cold wind blows from the basement, even when the door is closed. Last night, I heard someone knocking on the wall, rhythmic thuds as if whispering, "You're here. You are here. You're here." I do not know how much time is left, but I'm sure if I open the basement door tomorrow morning, I'll see new names. And my name will be at the top of the list. I haven't slept in 3 days. Sleeping means letting yourself relax, and relaxation here is tantamount to death. Every sound in the house now seems like a threat. Last night, I discovered that all the windows on the ground floor were locked from inside. I didn't lock them myself. This morning, when I tried to go out to the kitchen, the door leading to it was locked. I stood in the darkness of the hallway, clutching a bread knife, the only weapon I had found. The door creaked, and I heard whispers behind it. The voice sounded hollow, as if from underwater. "You have to understand," he said, "this is not a game." I didn't answer, but suddenly the door swung open. The kitchen was empty, but there was a letter on the table. "Have you eaten today?" It was written in large letters. Under the letter is a piece of bread soaked in something dark. I didn't try it. In the evening, I noticed that cracks had appeared in the wall between the rooms. They spread out in the shape of an arrow pointing at my old sofa. I found an old box under the sofa. It contains a dozen keys, a stack of old letters, and photographs. They depicted people whose names I had seen in the basement. On the back of each picture is the date of their disappearance. The scariest thing is that I'm starting to see him. Not in a dream, but in reality. Out of the corner of my eye, I notice a gray shadow in the corner when I turn on the light. One day he was standing at the window, with his back to me and looking at the road. I froze, not breathing, until he disappeared, leaving the imprint of the mask on the glass, a wet trace in the shape of a face. I tried to call the police, but the phone is silent. The line just went down last night. Now I can hear someone dialing my number, but not picking up the phone. The beeps repeat endlessly until they stop. I found a note on the windowsill last night. "Get ready." It was written in blood. I don't understand whose blood it is. Maybe mine? A few hours ago, I cut my finger while opening a jar of juice. I'm sitting in the living room right now, leaning against the door. The lights are off. I don't want him to see me. But I hear a floorboard creak somewhere. Or is it my imagination? No, it's too loud. The creaking of the floorboards turned into a chain of footsteps. They were getting closer. Every sound reverberated in my chest. My heart was pounding so hard that I was afraid he would hear. The living room door was left open, and I couldn't close it. I risked attracting attention. The footsteps stopped at the doorway. I couldn't see him, but I could feel his gaze through the mask. The air became viscous, as if the air conditioner had been turned on at full power in the room. "You're still here." The voice was distorted, as if he was speaking through a cloth. "I thought you'd run away." I didn't answer. "You found the box. Good. Now you know the rules." "The rules? There are always rules," he whispered. "You have to understand why they didn't come back." I got to my feet, holding the knife in front of me. "Who are you?" "The one who stayed." He laughed hoarsely, and the laughter sounded like the rasp of metal on concrete. "Do you think this is a house? This is not a house. This is a place for those who can't find a way out." The footsteps moved to the side. I backed away, but he stopped. "Let's go," he said. "I'll show you how it works." I didn't move. "Will you resist?" "Good." Many resisted. He came into the room. I couldn't see him, but I could feel him standing a meter away from me. "Have you seen the photos?" he asked. Their faces were there. They were also looking for a way out. My finger tightened on the handle of the knife. "Do you think a knife will help?" He laughed. "Do you think I do not know where you sleep?" He took a step forward. I rushed to the side, but he was faster. A black-gloved hand grabbed my wrist. The knife flew out of his hands and hit the floor loudly. "You're not the first," he whispered, "and not the last one." He dragged me to the door. I screamed, but my voice turned into a rasp. "You have to understand," he repeated. "This is not a game. This." He opened the door to the basement. There, in the darkness, I saw them. Not shadows, not ghosts, but footprints. Scratches, blood, names. And among them is my picture pinned to the wall. "This is your room," he said. "You're here forever now." I tried to resist, but he squeezed my hand so hard that the bones cracked. "You won't understand until you come with me." He started down the stairs. I saw the light of a flashlight flash, and familiar faces flashed in the beam of light. That IT was dark in the basement, but I could see the light of the flashlight gliding along the walls. The beam stopped on a board covered with names. My name is already there, written in fresh blood. "Why are you doing this?" I croaked. He didn't answer. His hand was holding me tightly, but suddenly I felt him tremble. "They couldn't get out." The voice became quieter. "You won't get out either." I tried to pull away, but he tightened his grip on my arm. "Why?" "Because it's not a house," he whispered. It's a place for those who can't leave." The beam of the flashlight illuminated a recess in the wall. There were bones in the dust. I couldn't make out their shapes, but they were human. "Do you think I'm the only one?" he asked. "You're wrong." He dragged me to the far wall. There, behind a curtain of rags, were stacks of old magazines and newspapers. The pages were cut out where the photos of the victims should have been. "They're gone," he said. "But their names are still there." I froze when he opened the drawer. There were keys inside, the same as the ones I found in the box. "These are the keys to the doors," he whispered. "But they won't open." I looked at him, or at what was hidden under the mask. "You're here too," I said. "You can't leave either." He froze. "You don't understand." "I understand," I interrupted. "You're part of this place. You are not a murderer. You are the victim." He abruptly released me, and I fell to the floor. "You don't know anything." "Stop it," he shouted. "They've come. They forced us." "Who?" He stopped talking, and silence fell in the basement. "They'll come again," he whispered. "And you're staying, too." I started to crawl towards the stairs, but he grabbed me again. "No," he said. "You have to stay. This law." I punched him in the stomach. He bent over, and I pulled away. He rushed to the stairs, but the door was locked at the top. "You're not coming out," a voice said from behind. "You're already here." He grabbed me again. I saw him take off his mask. "You're not a murderer," I repeated. "You're just like me." He froze. I do not know," he whispered. "I forgot." "Then why are we here?" He pointed to the wall, where the inscription was visible between the names. "They will come for us." "They're already here," he said, "and we can't leave." I felt him squeeze my hand again. "You're part of it now," he said. "You'll be waiting too." And suddenly, I heard footsteps. Not his footsteps. Footsteps from outside. Someone was knocking on the door of the house. "Who's there?" I shouted, but he grabbed my shoulders. "Don't open it," he whispered. "It's them." The footsteps outside the door grew louder. Someone was knocking on the door, demanding that I open it. "It's them," he whispered, trembling. "They've come for us." I tried to get up, but he grabbed my arm. "Don't come out," he said. "They'll take you away." "Who are they?" I asked. He stopped talking, and silence fell in the basement. "They're the ones who created this place," he finally replied. "They said we should stay." I heard the door to the house open. "Who's there?" I shouted. There is no response. Only footsteps on the stairs. "They're here," he whispered. "Run to the basement." He dragged me to the far wall, where there was a narrow passage leading to a dark corridor. "There's a way out," he said. "But you have to choose. Where's the exit?" "I don't know, but it's better than staying." I followed him. The corridor was narrow. The walls were made of raw stone. Finally, we stopped in front of a door covered with a rusty grate. "This is the last chance," he said. "If you open it, you won't be able to come back." I put the key in the lock, the one I found in the box. The grate opened with a bang, and I saw a staircase leading up. "Run," he said, "and don't look back." I started to get up. The steps were slippery with damp. At the top, a door led to another basement, a strange, unfamiliar one. I stopped. "Why are you helping me?" I shouted down. "Because I want to leave too," I heard him whisper. "But I can't." I went out into the new basement. There was an old suitcase full of keys in the corner. I took one and opened the door. There was a garden behind it, the night, the moon, and the road in the distance. I ran without looking back. But there was a letter in his pocket. "You are not free," it said. "They're still here." I don't understand what that means. Only now do I see that there are scratches on my hands, and there are keys in my pocket that I didn't put there myself. And tonight in the dark, I heard footsteps again, that I ran along the road until I stopped from exhaustion. The sun had already risen, but there was a letter in my pocket that I couldn't read in the dark. "You are not free," it said. "They're still here." Are they the ones who created this place? Or is he, the one who helped me get out? I tried to remember his face. In the basement, he took off his mask, but I didn't have time to make out the features. I just had a glimpse of something familiar. I found a phone booth at the end of the street. I dialed the police number, but they didn't pick up the phone. Then I went to the store to buy food. In the store, the salesman looked at me strangely. "You're not from this area," he said. "No one has lived here for a long time." "What do you mean he doesn't live?" "This place is abandoned. No one has been coming here for 20 years. I froze. 20 years. Yes. The last resident disappeared in 2003. I went outside, feeling the ground give out from under my feet. There was a letter in his pocket again. "You're not free." I went back to the house I bought, but he was gone. In its place is a wasteland overgrown with grass. I found an old local man sitting on a bench. "This place is cursed," he said. "In the 80s, there was a man who lived here." "What?" "He disappeared, leaving a diary. There were names. And the keys." I pulled the keys out of my pocket. "Have you seen these?" The old man nodded. "These are the keys to the basement." "But there is no basement. The house burned down many years ago." I felt the cold seep into my bones. "How? How can you know that?" "I lived there," he coughed, "before everything disappeared." I remembered the letter. "They're coming for us." Footsteps sounded in the distance. The old man stood up and looked in the same direction. The old man stood up and looked in the same direction as the footsteps. "You have to leave," he repeated. "They're already here." I backed away, but he grabbed my arm. "Wait." I exhaled. "What is this place? Why is everything repeating itself?" He froze, and I saw fear in his eyes. "This is not the place," he whispered. "This cycle. They created it so that we couldn't escape." I felt the cold seep into my bones. "Who are they?" "Those who live in basements," he replied. "The ones who stayed." The footsteps were getting closer. Now I've heard them from everywhere, from the side of the house, from the street, even from underground. "They've come for you," the old man said. "You have to understand that you are not the first person to come here." I tried to break away from him and run, but my feet seemed rooted to the ground. "Why?" I shouted. "Why is everything repeating itself?" "Because it's not a house," he replied. "This." He didn't finish. A man in a gray mask came around the corner of the house. Him, I thought. The one who helped me get out. "You shouldn't have come back," he said. "Now everything will happen again." The old man tried to grab him, but he staggered back. "You can't stop them," the old man whispered. "They'll make you stay." I backed away, but I ran into a wall. "What do you want from me?" "You have to stay," he replied. "It's the law." "What law?" "The law of the cycle," said the old man. "Everyone who comes here becomes a part of history." He took off his mask. I froze. You haven't changed," the old man whispered. 20 years. "I can't get away," he said. "Just like you." I looked at my hands. The scratches merged into familiar patterns, the same ones that were on the basement walls. "What is this place?" I asked again. "This." The old man paused, looking at him. "It's a place where everything repeats itself." He stepped forward. "You have to stay," he repeated, "or they'll take you away." "Who?" "The ones who created it," the old man replied. "Those who come for us." The footsteps blended into one rhythm. "No," I whispered. "Yes," said he. "You're already here." He pulled on my arm. "Let's go," he said. "It's time to start over." And I felt the ground begin to cave in under my feet, that I woke up on the edge of the road. The sun was shining brightly, and there was no house, no old man, and no one I called him. There was a letter in my pocket, and I tore it up without reading it. But I still have my keys in my pocket. I got up and walked toward the city. My legs carried me to the center, where the old store stood. There was no one inside, but there was a letter behind the counter. "You didn't leave," it said. "You're part of a cycle. Everyone who comes here is next on the list. You saw their names in the basement. They're not victims. These are the ones who, like you, failed to understand the truth." I sat down on the floor. My ears were ringing, but I remembered the old man's words. "This place is cursed." Cursed, or just forgotten. I went outside and saw a billboard. There was a picture of a house I bought on it. A house that no longer existed. "For sale," the ad read. I suddenly realized this is not a house. It's a trap. And I'm not the only one who got into it. I went to the police station. The officer looked at me with a grin. "You're here again," he said. "We've already talked about this." "No," I said. "I haven't been here before." "You came here 20 years ago," he nodded. "Or maybe it was another you." I froze. "What do you mean?" He took out a file folder. The case of the house on the edge of the city. People were disappearing there. Everyone left their keys and a diary. I looked at my hands. The xerics were clean. "It's impossible," I whispered. "Maybe," he replied. "Time is not linear here. You come, you disappear, you come back." "But why?" The officer closed the folder. "Because you are part of the system. You come to repeat the mistakes of the past. You're looking for a way out, but it doesn't exist. Then how? You can't break out until you realize that this is not the place. It's a metaphor. A metaphor for what? A metaphor of human nature. We always go back to the old mistakes. You come here to repeat history." I felt the ground give out from under my feet. "You mean, what is it?" "An illusion. It's real," he replied. "A reality where we cannot escape our fears. You come here to realize that you cannot be saved until you accept the truth. You are not a prisoner of the cycle. You're part of the cycle. You come here again and again because you're afraid to move forward. You're afraid of life, so you stay in this place where you can see your mistakes but not fix them." I went outside. The sun was shining as brightly as before. I didn't know what to do, but the keys were in his pocket again. I threw them on the ground, and suddenly I realized these are not keys. It's a watch. The watch I wore 20 years ago. I looked at myself in the store's mirror. I was 20 years younger. I remembered the first time I came here, how I bought a house, how I found the diary, and I realized I'm still there. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. I went back to the road. An old man was standing there. "You're here again," he said. "It's time to start over." "No," I replied. "I'm staying." He looked at me in surprise. "You can't. You have to come back." "Why?" "Because it's your choice." "Then I choose to stay." He froze. "You don't understand." "I understand," I interrupted. "It's not a trap. This is a test, and I'm going through it." I walked toward the house I saw in the ads. For sale, I thought, but I didn't buy it. I just walked by, and for the first time in 20 years, I heard the whisper of the wind instead of footsteps in the basement. I do not know what will happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The footsteps outside the door grew louder. Someone was knocking on the door, demanding that I open it. "It's them," he whispered, trembling. "They've come for us." I tried to get up, but he grabbed my arm. "Don't come out," he said. "They'll take you away." "Who are they?" I asked. He stopped talking, and silence fell in the basement. "They're the ones who created this place," he finally replied. "They said we should stay." I heard the door to the house open. "Who's there?" I shouted. There is no response. Only footsteps on the stairs. "They're here," he whispered. "Run to the basement." He dragged me to the far wall, where there was a narrow passage leading to a dark corridor. "There's a way out," he said. "But you have to choose. Where's the exit?" "I don't know, but it's better than staying." I followed him. The corridor was narrow. The walls were made of raw stone. Finally, we stopped in front of a door covered with a rusty grate. "This is the last chance," he said. "If you open it, you won't be able to come back." I put the key in the lock, the one I found in the box. The grate opened with a bang, and I saw a staircase leading up. "Run," he said, "and don't look back." I started to get up. The steps were slippery with damp. At the top, a door led to another basement, a strange, unfamiliar one. I stopped. "Why are you helping me?" I shouted down. "Because I want to leave too," I heard him whisper. "But I can't." I went out into the new basement. There was an old suitcase full of keys in the corner. I took one and opened the door. There was a garden behind it, the night, the moon, and the road in the distance. I ran without looking back, but there was a letter in his pocket. "You are not free," it said. "They're still here." I don't understand what that means. Only now do I see that there are scratches on my hands, and there are keys in my pocket that I didn't put there myself. And tonight in the dark, I heard footsteps again that I ran along the road until I stopped from exhaustion. The sun had already risen, but there was a letter in my pocket that I couldn't read in the dark. "You are not free," it said. "They're still here." Are they the ones who created this place? Or is he the one who helped me get out? I tried to remember his face. In the basement, he took off his mask, but I didn't have time to make out the features. I just had a glimpse of something familiar. I found a phone booth at the end of the street. I dialed the police number, but they didn't pick up the phone. Then I went to the store to buy food. In the store, the salesman looked at me strangely. "You're not from this area," he said. "No one has lived here for a long time." "What do you mean he doesn't live?" "This place is abandoned. No one has been coming here for 20 years. I froze. 20 years. Yes. The last resident disappeared in 2003. I went outside, feeling the ground give out from under my feet. There was a letter in his pocket again. "You're not free." I went back to the house I bought, but he was gone. In its place is a wasteland overgrown with grass. I found an old local man sitting on a bench. "This place is cursed," he said. "In the 80s, there was a man who lived here." "What?" He disappeared, leaving a diary. There were names. And the keys. I pulled the keys out of my pocket. Have you seen these? The old man nodded. These are the keys to the basement. But there is no basement. The house burned down many years ago. I felt the cold seep into my bones. How? How can you know that? I lived there, he coughed, before everything disappeared. I remembered the letter. They're coming for us. Footsteps sounded in the distance. The old man stood up and looked in the same direction. The old man stood up and looked in the same direction as the footsteps. You have to leave, he repeated. They're already here. I backed away, but he grabbed my arm. Wait. I exhaled. What is this place? Why is everything repeating itself? He froze, and I saw fear in his eyes. This is not the place, he whispered. This cycle. They created it so that we couldn't escape. I felt the cold seep into my bones. Who are they? Those who live in basements, he replied. The ones who stayed. The footsteps were getting closer. Now I've heard them from everywhere, from the side of the house, from the street, even from underground. They've come for you, the old man said. You have to understand that you are not the first person to come here. I tried to break away from him and run, but my feet seemed rooted to the ground. Why? I shouted. Why is everything repeating itself? Because it's not a house, he replied. This. He didn't finish. A man in a gray mask came around the corner of the house. Him, I thought. The one who helped me get out. You shouldn't have come back, he said. Now everything will happen again. The old man tried to grab him, but he staggered back. You can't stop them, the old man whispered. They'll make you stay. I backed away, but I ran into a wall. What do you want from me? You have to stay, he replied. It's the law. What law? The law of the cycle, said the old man. Everyone who comes here becomes a part of history. He took off his mask. I froze. You haven't changed, the old man whispered. 20 years. I can't get away, he said. Just like you. I looked at my hands. The scratches merged into familiar patterns, the same ones that were on the basement walls. What is this place? I asked again. This. The old man paused, looking at him. It's a place where everything repeats itself. He stepped forward. You have to stay, he repeated, or they'll take you away. Who? The ones who created it, the old man replied. Those who come for us. The footsteps blended into one rhythm. No, I whispered. Yes, said he. You're already here. He pulled on my arm. Let's go, he said. It's time to start over. And I felt the ground begin to cave in under my feet that I woke up on the edge of the road. The sun was shining brightly, and there was no house, no old man, and no one I called him. There was a letter in my pocket, and I tore it up without reading it, but I still have my keys in my pocket. I got up and walked toward the city. My legs carried me to the center, where the old store stood. There was no one inside, but there was a letter behind the counter. You didn't leave, it said. You're part of a cycle. Everyone who comes here is next on the list. You saw their names in the basement. They're not victims. These are the ones who, like you, failed to understand the truth. I sat down on the floor. My ears were ringing, but I remembered the old man's words. This place is cursed. Cursed or just forgotten. I went outside and saw a billboard. There was a picture of the house I bought on it. A house that no longer existed. For sale, the ad read. I suddenly realized this is not a house. It's a trap, and I'm not the only one who got into it. I went to the police station. The officer looked at me with a grin. You're here again, he said. We've already talked about this. No, I said. I haven't been here before. You came here 20 years ago, he nodded. Or maybe it was another you. I froze. What do you mean? He took out a file folder. The case of the house on the edge of the city. People were disappearing there. Everyone left their keys and a diary. I looked at my hands. The Xerox were clean. It's impossible, I whispered. Maybe, he replied. Time is not linear here. You come, you disappear, you come back. But why? The officer closed the folder. Because you are part of the system. You come to repeat the mistakes of the past. You're looking for a way out, but it doesn't exist. Then how? You can't break out until you realize that this is not the place. It's a metaphor. A metaphor for what? A metaphor of human nature. We always go back to the old mistakes. You come here to repeat history. I felt the ground give out from under my feet. You mean, what is it? An illusion? It's real, he replied. A reality where we cannot escape our fears. You come here to realize that you cannot be saved until you accept the truth. You are not a prisoner of the cycle. You're part of the cycle. You come here again and again because you're afraid to move forward. You're afraid of life, so you stay in this place where you can see your mistakes but not fix them. I went outside. The sun was shining as brightly as before. I didn't know what to do, but the keys were in his pocket again. I threw them on the ground, and suddenly I realized these are not keys. It's a watch. The watch I wore 20 years ago. I looked at myself in the store's mirror. I was 20 years younger. I remembered the first time I came here, how I bought a house, how I found the diary, and I realized I'm still there. I just didn't want to admit it to myself. I went back to the road. An old man was standing there. "You're here again," he said. "It's time to start over." "No," I replied. "I'm staying." He looked at me in surprise. "You can't. You have to come back." "Why?" "Because it's your choice." "Then I choose to stay." He froze. "You don't understand." "I understand," I interrupted. "It's not a trap. This is a test, and I'm going through it." I walked toward the house I saw in the ads. For sale, I thought, but I didn't buy it. I just walked by, and for the first time in 20 years, I heard the whisper of the wind instead of footsteps in the basement. I do not know what will happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt free. "Now," she said, and abruptly released me. "Go to the garden. There's an old tunnel there. It leads to the forest." I didn't know what kind of tunnel it was, but there was nowhere to run. I nodded and turned to the stairs. But when I went up to the second floor, the house seemed to come alive. The walls were whispering. They didn't whisper. They rustled like old pages that I touched in the basement. The ceilings hung down as if crushing me. I got to my room and grabbed my backpack. All this time I heard footsteps behind me, muffled, but I didn't look back. "You're not alone," a voice whispered outside the door. I froze. It was Tom's voice, but it didn't sound the same as before. "I've been waiting for you," he said. I didn't answer. My heart was pounding in my chest, as if it wanted to burst out. "They want you to stay." Tom's voice sounded everywhere now. From under the bed, from behind the door, from under the floor. I grabbed my backpack and ran out into the hallway. The walls here were covered with cracks, as if the house was shrinking. "Stop," his mother's voice rang out. I turned around. She was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and her face was illuminated by the dim light. "You shouldn't go there," she said. "Why?" I asked. "Because they're waiting. Their children are now your children. You have to stay." I didn't understand what she meant, but the footsteps outside the basement door got louder. "Go," she whispered, "before it's too late." I rushed to the door, but when I opened it, Tom was standing in the doorway. "You're not leaving," he said, and his eyes were empty. I backed away. "They're waiting for you." His voice trembled, as if he were repeating someone's words. "Tom, it's me." He didn't answer. His face was calm, but there were lines trembling at the corners of his mouth, as if he was holding back laughter. "They're inside," he said. "Always inside." I couldn't wait any longer. I yanked the door open and ran outside. The night was dark without stars. The forest stood behind the house like a wall. "You're not leaving," the mother screamed. I didn't look back. He ran along the path leading to the river. Every step echoed in my ears, as if someone was whispering behind my back. "They're here," I thought. "They're always here." I reached the edge of the forest. The river was below, its waters black and still. "You have to choose," a voice said from behind. I stopped. It was his father's voice, but he died. "You can't leave," he said. I turned around. "Why?" I asked. "Because this is your home," the voice sounded from behind the trees. "And you will always be here." I backed away, but the edge of the forest opened up in front of me. There was a house there. Our house. "You can't escape," his mother's voice rang out. "You're already here." I closed my eyes. "Help," I whispered. But there was no response. Only the whisper of the wind in the leaves. And footsteps behind him. I couldn't breathe. The forest around me was moving, as if the walls of the house had turned into trees. I ran, but I still ended up on the same path leading to the house. The voices of his mother and father sounded everywhere, in the wind, in the rustle of leaves, in his own breathing. "You have to stay," his father's voice said. "They're waiting," his mother would say. I stopped, leaning against a tree. Its bark was wet, as if the forest was crying. "It's not you," I whispered. "Who is it then?" asked Tom. I whirled around. He was standing 3 steps away from me, his face as pale as a corpse's, but his eyes were laughing. "You're not my brother," I said. "I am your brother," he replied. "Have you forgotten?" I backed away, but he took a step forward. "You have to come back," he said. "They're getting your room ready." I asked, but he had already disappeared. I looked around. The forest tightened around me. The bushes clung to my clothes as if they wanted to stop me. A river appeared in the distance. "It's safe there," I whispered to myself. But when I got closer to the water receded. The river widened, and I saw our house on the opposite bank. "You can't run away," his father's voice rang out. I couldn't see him, but I knew he was somewhere nearby. "You're already here," said the voice. I stood on the shore. The water was pitch black. I took off my shoes and stepped into the water. "Don't be silly," his mother's voice rang out. "You're going to drown." But I didn't stop. The water was icy, it burned my feet. "You can't swim across," she said. "There are currents there." I didn't believe it. All this time, I thought that the house was walls and windows. But now I realized that he was alive. He's breathing, he's thinking, he's waiting. "You're not alone," I whispered. "No," replied a voice from under the water. I looked down. The water was clear, and I saw them. Bodies. The children's bodies that floated in the river. "They're here," I said. "We've always been here." The body trembled. The water rose as if the river was alive. "Help," I shouted, but there was no response. "They're waiting," his father's voice whispered. I tried to swim, but the currents were stronger. "You have to come back," the mother said. "No," I whispered, but my body wasn't listening anymore. It went down into the darkness under the water. And then I saw him. House. He was standing on the shore as always. His windows glowed like eyes. "You're back," the mother said. But I didn't come back. I drowned. Or not, the water filled my lungs. Cold as steel. I tried to come up, but the currents were stronger. There were bodies floating around, children's bodies, as the mother said. Their hair fluttered like seaweed. "You have to stay," one of them whispered. I couldn't see the face, but the voice sounded like Tom. "Don't be silly," said another figure. The mother's voice. I tried to fight, but my arms wouldn't work. "The body is as heavy as a stone." I shouted, but the water drowned out my voice. Then I saw him. House. He was standing on the shore as always. The windows glowed like eyes. "Come back," he whispered. But I didn't come back. I drowned. Or not, I woke up. He was lying on the floor in his room. Sunlight flooded the window. Tom was asleep in his bed, his face calm. My mother was making breakfast. "Hello," she said. "You've been sleeping for a long time." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding in my chest. "You didn't drown?" I asked. "What do you mean?" My mother looked at me in disbelief. "In the river." "You didn't come out today," she said. "You've been asleep since this morning." I looked at my watch. 10 a.m. "I had a dream," I whispered. "Is everything okay?" asked Tom, waking up. "Yes," I lied. But in the bathroom, I saw myself in the mirror. My face was as pale as a corpse's. "You're already here," the reflection whispered. I couldn't look away. "You've always been here," my smile said. I closed my eyes. And when I opened them again, I was no longer alone. My mother was standing behind me. "You're still sleeping," she said. "No," I whispered. "You have to stay," she said. I backed away. "Where's Tom?" "He's already here," the mother replied. And then I felt hands behind my back. They're cold, strong ones, pulling me back. The hands behind my back were gripping me so tightly that my bones were numb. His mother stood behind him, her breath tickling his neck. "You can't escape," she said. I tried to pull away, but she tightened her grip on my fingers. "You have to stay," she repeated. I saw Tom in the mirror. He stood in the doorway, his face calm, but his eyes were empty. "They're waiting," he said. I didn't know who they were, but I realized that this was the end. "I'm not your brother," I whispered. "You are my brother," he replied. "You've always been my brother." I tried to scream, but my mother covered my mouth with her hand. "You're at home here," she said. Then I remembered the basement. Box. Diary. "Why did you do that?" I asked. "We couldn't be alone," the mother replied. "They're coming for you, and for us, and we have to be ready." I struggled with her hands. "Those who live here," she said. "Those who are waiting." I didn't understand, but suddenly I smelled mold and rusty blood. The smell of the basement. "You have to choose," the mother said. "Stay or die." I couldn't breathe. Her hands were clutching her throat. "I can't," I croaked. "Then die," she said. At the same moment, I elbowed her in the stomach. My mother let me go, doubled over. "You don't understand," she said. I rushed to the door, but Tom blocked the way. "You're not leaving," he said. I punched him in the face. He fell, but immediately got up. "You're not my brother," I shouted. "You are my brother," he grabbed my hand. "We fought like we did when we were kids, but now it wasn't a game." "Help," I shouted, but there were no others in the house. Just us. "You can't run away," said the mother, getting up. I tore myself out of Tom's arms and ran for the stairs. "You have to stay," they shouted, and I didn't look back. He went downstairs into the hallway and yanked open the door. But there was no forest beyond it. There was a basement. I turned on the light. Everything was like yesterday. The box, the photo, the diary. "You're here," his mother's voice rang out. She was standing in the doorway. "This is your home," she said. "You've always been here." I backed away. "Why?" I asked. "Because they're waiting," she replied. "Their children are now our children, and we have to be ready." I didn't understand, but suddenly I saw a photo on the floor. There was a boy there. I was on it, but the date in the corner is 1987. "You're already here," the mother said. "You've always been here." I fell to my knees. "What should I do?" I asked. "Stay," she said, "or die." I closed my eyes, and when I opened them again, I was no longer alone. "Because it's the only way to win," she whispered. "Now you're going to tell everyone. Tell them that I died because of them, and they will blame themselves." The last breath. Her eyes remained open, staring at the ceiling where the chandelier once hung. In the morning, the school declared mourning. The director cried at the meeting, talking about a tragic accident. Her diary was in my pocket. Last entry, "He will believe in my death. He has to believe." And there was a surprise waiting for me on the roof of the gym, where I went up at night. Dozens of cans of clean air, arranged in the shape of a heart. And a note, "Thank you for helping me disappear. Lucy." I can still hear her laughter in the ventilation. But now I know it's not a hallucination. It's her, lively, somewhere out there, outside the school that we destroyed. And afterward, for those who have watched to the end, are you still breathing? Good? Bad? I don't know. If you hear a whisper in the vent, it's not Lucy. It's you. You're already part of the system, even if you haven't inhaled their poison. You ask questions, you look for answers, you look at the screens, and they're looking at you. Do you think this is the end? This is just the beginning. School is just a small piece of the puzzle. Tomorrow you will go to work, breathe in the air conditioner, drink water from the cooler, and you'll be thinking, what if? Don't look for Lucy. She's everywhere. In every message that you ignore. In every contract that you sign. In every case, it's okay is when you're screaming inside that it's wrong. And when the ventilation turns on at night, listen. There's someone there. There always is. P.S. Turn off the sound. Immediately. They don't have to know what you're hearing. I've always loved abandoned places. Not because of adrenaline or the desire to find something that shouldn't exist. I was fascinated by the traces of other people's lives, faded photographs on the floor, patient lists with neat notes, escape or death, scraps of letters pressed against a brick by the window. That day, I came to the old hospital with a camera and a notebook to finish a project about forgotten institutions. I didn't know that this would be my last investigation. The building greeted me with the cracking of floorboards underfoot and the smell of mold ingrained in the walls. The first floor was relatively intact, rusty gurneys, overturned filing cabinets, and walls with peeling paint. But something else started happening on the second floor. The door to the west wing was ajar, although the locals claimed that all the entrances were sealed. I entered, and the light of the lantern picked out a long corridor with unlabeled doors. On one of them hung a sign, "Isolation Ward," nailed with nails, which someone tore out, leaving dents in the wood. I found some notes inside the isolation ward. Not the doctor's diaries, they were taken out long ago. They were pages from a notebook covered with small handwriting on the walls. "They hear me screaming, but they don't come," read one inscription under a layer of lime. Another, "Don't drink tap water. They add something to make us sleep." I took a picture of them, feeling the cold seep into my jacket, even though it was hot outside. Deeper in the hallway was a pile of old medical records. The names of the patients were erased, but the diagnoses remained: persecution mania, artificially induced, catatonia after prolonged detention in the punishment cell. Suddenly, the lantern flickered and went out. I froze, trying to remember where I'd left the spare. A creak cut through the silence, as if someone were slowly dragging a metal sheet across concrete. The sound came from below. When I got down to the first floor, I heard again, a rasp, footsteps, a thud at the far end. The lantern came to life, blinking, but there was enough light to make out the door to the basement. It was torn off its hinges and leaned against the wall. There were pieces of rope and a piece of cloth that looked like part of a hospital gown. I stepped inside, and then I realized that someone was living here. Not ghosts, but people. There were empty cans on the floor, fresh cigarette butts, and a mattress covered with newspapers from last month stood against the wall. And then I heard a voice. Not an echo or a hallucination, but a hoarse whisper repeating, "He's coming for you." It was coming from behind the wall. I pressed my ear to it and heard the sound of chains. Someone was trying to talk through the gag. I started looking for a way out, but the corridors I had passed through were gone, as if the walls had shifted. Instead, there were only narrow manholes littered with furniture, and the smell of rotting flesh grew stronger with every step. The lantern is completely dead. I groped my way, clinging to the walls, until I came across a door with a deadbolt. There was a staircase behind it, but not the one I had come down. It smelled of blood. The stairs led to a tiny room with no windows. There was a broken screen TV on the wall, and beneath it were videotapes labeled Session 12 and Patient 09. I plugged one into a tape recorder, which miraculously worked, and saw footage of a man in a straitjacket writhing on the floor while someone off-camera laughs. Then the camera showed the face of a nurse holding a syringe. Her eyes were blank. When I turned off the TV, I heard a door slam upstairs. Footsteps. A lot of steps. They were getting closer. I tried to go back, but the stairs collapsed. Then I ran forward through an emergency exit that led to an underground tunnel. There were cages here. In one of them lay a skeleton in the remains of a hospital gown, clutching a key in his hand. Someone had scratched on the wall of the cage, "He's here. Run away." I didn't take the key. Instead, I ran until I came to a grate behind which I could hear the noise of cars. It was the exit to the underground parking lot. But when I got out, I realized that I was not outside, but in another wing of the building. There was a light on here, dim and flickering. At the end of the corridor was a gurney with straps tied to it. There were tools on the tray next to it, a saw, syringes, scissors. There was a badge with the name Dr. Gray lying nearby, and then I heard him. The very sound that started all, the creak of metal on concrete. He was getting closer. I couldn't see him, but I could feel something heavy being dragged behind me. I ran, turning into random doors, until I found myself in the operating room. There was a man lying on the table, alive. His mouth was taped shut, and his eyes were wide open. He looked at me as if I were his salvation, but when I reached for the straps, the door slammed shut. There was a smell of smoke. The sprinklers turned on, but instead of water, a dark liquid that looked like blood was pouring out of them. That I rushed to the exit, but my hand got stuck in the sticky liquid gushing from the sprinklers. She was warm. It wasn't blood, it was oil or some chemical stuff that made my throat itch. The man on the table twitched, trying to scream through the tape. His eyes were now looking past me, into the doorway. I turned around. A man in a robe with rust stains was standing there. In his hands, he held a metal pipe, similar to those that were lying in the basement. His face resembled a wax mask, pale, with cracked skin on the cheekbones. But the worst of it was the eyes, not mad, but empty, as if someone had taken everything out of them except the hunter's instinct. He stepped forward, and I noticed a tattoo on his neck, the numbers 09, under a crossed-out cross. I rushed to the tool cabinets, grabbing anything that could become a weapon. The patient on the table wheezed as the doctor approached him. He wasn't trying to kill, he was just doing his job, like a butcher butchering a carcass. I threw the tray at him, but he didn't even move. Then I ran, lashing the walls with a flashlight, until I found a door marked archive. Inside was a windowless room filled with folders. There were dozens of photographs on the floor, patients in straitjackets, doctors in 70s suits, group shots with smiling nurses. But in all the photos, the faces were cut with a knife. Only one picture showed the man with the 09 tattoo standing in a corner with his head down. A door slammed behind her. I hid behind the closet, breathing through my sleeve. The doctor entered, dragging something heavy on the floor. What's left of the patient on the table. He threw it into a corner, and I heard metal hitting concrete. Then he started sorting through the folders, throwing them on the floor. If I didn't look for it, I destroyed it. I started to crawl towards the exit, but he was suddenly there. His hand tightened on my shoulder, and I felt my nails digging into my skin. Then I hit him with a piece of glass from the broken frame. He didn't scream, just let out a muffled groan, like the sound of a burst tire. But it was enough to break free. The escape turned into a maze of identical corridors. There were new inscriptions on walls. He's in the walls. Don't sleep. Do you hear? I didn't realize where I was going until I came across a flight of stairs leading to the roof. The door was closed, but the lock was broken. The fresh air hit my face like a slap in the face. I took a step forward, and the floor collapsed under my feet. Not a roof, but a trap, an attic with rotten boards under which a light could be seen. I fell on something soft, old mattresses stuffed with rotten straw. Voices were coming from below. "Check the perimeter," a female voice said. He couldn't leave. I carefully lifted the edge of the board. There were 3 uniformed guards at the bottom. One of them had a gun. The other has a walkie-talkie crackling with static. The cameras recorded the movement in the archive, added a third. Look for patient 09. They weren't ghosts. They weren't crazy. They were guarding this place. And then I realized the hospital is not abandoned. It's simple, repurposed, and I froze, pressed into the rotten mattresses. The guards below moved methodically like robots. One of them had a key with a Sector D tag on his belt. Without waiting for them to storm the attic, I crawled to the opposite edge. The floor here was strewn with glass fragments, the remains of dormer windows. The light from the lanterns outside shone through the holes. I peered out cautiously. The courtyard of the hospital turned out to be a huge wasteland surrounded by a concrete fence with barbed wire. But behind him, 100 meters away, there was a road. And people. Not security, but ordinary passers-by with bags, cyclists. They were walking past, not paying attention to the building. It was as if he didn't exist. That's when I noticed the camera. It was hanging from a lamppost, pointing directly at the attic window. And it was flashing red. "He's on the roof," hissed the radio. "Turn on the generator." There was a rumble from below, similar to the sound of a starter motor. The attic shook, and part of the wall fell off with a bang, revealing a view of nothing. There was a 10-meter deep pit where the courtyard should be. At the bottom lay the skeletons of cars, concrete blocks, and bones. Dozens of skeletons in rags of hospital gowns. "Jump," I whispered to myself, "or you'll burn." The hum turned into a roar. I realized that it wasn't a generator. The building was falling apart on its own. The beams were cracking, and the floor was falling through in sections like in bridge collapse movies. I jumped into the pit, aiming for a pile of trash. The blow knocked the air out of my lungs, but I got up and ran, stumbling over the skeleton's ribs. Suddenly the light went out. Not completely. A lamp was burning in the far corner of the pit, illuminating a metal door with a combination lock. A man in an orange janitor's vest was standing nearby. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the door, as if he was waiting for me to come up. "You're not one of them," he said without turning his head. "But you're one of us now." "Who are they?" I exhaled. "Those who erase the traces." He finally turned around. His face was disfigured by scars, and his eyes. One eye was missing, and in its place was a tattoo of 09. Until it started to rain. I didn't understand what he meant until I felt drops on my neck. Not water, but something thick and pungent. Like that liquid from the sprinklers. Puddles hissed on the ground, and the bones in the pit began to melt. "The door opens at 09, the janitor shouted as I entered the code. "But it's worse inside." They're there. They feed me." I burst into a corridor, which turned out to be not a corridor, but a tunnel with pipes under the ceiling. The same sludge was dripping from the ventilation. At the end, the monitor screen was on, broadcasting the image from the cameras, my car in the parking lot, the main entrance, the basement, and a room with a transparent wall behind which people in dressing gowns were sitting. Not patients, but doctors. They were eating from bowls, and their mouths were moving like hungry children. "Congratulations," a voice said from behind him. "You passed the casting." I turned around. A woman in a white lab coat with a badge, Dr. Gray, was holding a syringe. Not with medicine, but with a black, oily liquid. "You're suitable for the Sector D program," she smiled. "All you have to do is forget." I staggered back, but there was a wall behind me. Dr. Gray was approaching, her eyes never leaving my neck. The syringe in her hand glistened like a syringe filled with oil. "What is it?" I asked, trying to gain time. "The cure for the truth." Her voice sounded almost gentle. "You've seen too much. Now you are part of the experiment. Don't be afraid, it won't hurt. Only, you'll forget who you were." She lunged. I jerked to the side, but she saw it coming. Her foot hit me in the knee, and I collapsed on the pipes. The syringe hovered near my face. "Why would you do that?" I croaked, grabbing her wrist. "Because you're the perfect candidate." Anger broke through in her voice for the first time. "You came here voluntarily. You're curious. You." She didn't finish. A metal pipe fell from the ceiling, narrowly missing her head. A rumble echoed through the tunnel. Dr. Gray recoiled, and I saw a shadow creep around the bend. Not a man, but a silhouette made of scraps, a robe, bloody bandages, pieces of chains. The same patient 09. "Run!" Dr. Gray suddenly shouted. "He's going to kill us both." But I didn't move. The shadow was getting closer, and now I could see a face under the hood. Burnt skin, eye sockets filled with black goo, a mouth stretched in a smile from ear to ear. In his hand, he was clutching the same metal pipe that I had seen in the archive. Dr. Gray grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door marked Sector D. We ran into it a moment before the pipe crashed into the wall. The door slammed shut, and I saw that we were in the laboratory. Tables with test tubes, screens with graphs, glass chambers with people. Not by patients, but by people in ordinary clothes. They were sitting on the floor, staring into space, with sensors on their temples. "This is not an experiment," I whispered. "This is a factory. You're erasing people's memories. And we're creating new ones," she finished. "Without a past, without fears. Ideal citizens, and those who resist." She nodded at the cameras where people were silently shouting, "We're recycling." "Then why would I need a syringe?" I asked, slowly retreating to the control panel. "Because you're not an accidental guest," she suddenly smiled. "You came here for a reason. You've been looking for this." She pressed a button on the wall. The glass chambers opened. The people inside didn't move. "Look carefully," she said. "These are your future colleagues." And then I understood. My backpack was lying on the floor of one of the cells. My camera, my notebook, and a passport with my picture on it, but the name was different. "You've worked here before," she hissed, "but you ran away. And now we have you back." I stared at the passport, unable to move. "My photo, my date of birth, and my name is John Reed." But I knew that wasn't my name. Or, didn't you know? Fragments surfaced in my head. Someone screaming in the hallway, the smell of chloroform, gloved hands tightening the straps on the gurney. It wasn't someone else's memories, it was mine. But how? "You were our best specialist in memory erasure," Dr. Gray said, coming closer. "But after the accident in Sector B, you became unstable. They were afraid of cameras. They tried to destroy the archives. I had to isolate you." I grabbed the camera from my backpack. The pictures flashed on the screen. I'm in the operating room, taking pictures of patients with their eye sockets cut out. I'm in the basement, photographing cages with people chained to the walls. But the faces in the photo, they were blurred, as if someone had erased them after filming. "You erased the tracks yourself," she continued. "But the more they destroyed, the more they went crazy. In the end, you erased yourself." I rushed to the exit, but the door was blocked. Dr. Gray laughed, softly, almost tenderly. "You don't even remember the code for your own lab." She nodded at the panel by the door. "Enter 09. Your favorite patient. The one you turned into a model." I entered the numbers. The door opened, but there was no freedom behind it, just another corridor with surveillance cameras and the sound of footsteps. A lot of steps. "Run," she said, "or stay. The choice is yours. But if you choose the former, remember, you will not be able to return. They'll kill you." "Who are they?" I asked, backing towards the stairs. "Those who remember," her eyes narrowed. "Those whom you betrayed." I ran. The corridors changed one after another. First white walls with signs Sector D7, then dirty passages with peeling paint, then again sterile rooms with mirrors instead of windows. There were people here somewhere. I could hear their voices, screams, laughter. But when I looked through the doors, there were only empty beds and IVs. On the third floor, I came across an archive. Not the one where they found me, but the real one. Hundreds of boxes of films, discs, folders marked "Destroy" after viewing. I inserted a random tape into an old tape recorder. I appeared on the screen, in a white coat with a syringe in his hand. In front of me sat a man in a straitjacket, patient 09. "This is the last stage," I told him. "You will forget the pain. You will forget how they tortured you. You will forget that you are a human being." The patient did not resist. His eyes were as empty as a mannequin's. I injected him with liquid from a syringe. The screen filled with static. Then another entry. I'm in the operating room, cutting a patient's back with a scalpel. He hears me screaming, "But they don't come," he mutters. I insert something metallic into the wound. A microchip? The sensor? The patient twitches, but does not wake up. "It's you," I whispered, recoiling. "It's all of you." And then I realized why the hospital seemed alive. She was a maze of my own crimes. Every door is someone's erased life. Every writing on the wall is someone's last scream, which I drowned out that I was sitting on the archive floor, surrounded by cassettes and folders. The screen was blinking, showing new footage of me in a white lab coat, laughing at a patient who was strapped to a chair with electrodes. His face was contorted with pain, but I looked pleased. There was a printout on the table with the diagnosis, catatonia after 14 sessions of electric shock. Signed, the attending physician is J. Reed. Suddenly, a cart creaked outside the door. I turned off the tape recorder and hid behind the shelves. A nurse came in with a tray on which were syringes and ampoules of black liquid. She didn't even look in my direction. She just changed the tape in the tape recorder and left. The new recording shows the room where I woke up at the beginning of this story. Only now did I see her real self. The walls were soundproof, and there was a camera with a red light in the corner. Patient 09, day 23. Reaction to the drug Next 7, aggression, hallucinations, loss of speech. Is recommended to increase the dose. The voice over my voice sounded as smooth as a robot's. I stood up, feeling the ground give out from under my feet. I had to get out, but now I knew that the same walls were waiting for me outside, only in a different form. The building was a trap built by me, so that no one escapes, so that no one remembers. In the hallway, I came across a door marked Archive of Personal Belongings. The lock was broken. There were hundreds of cells inside, each with a patient's name on it. I was looking for mine, and I found it. Inside was a key, a notebook, and a gun. There was a photo under the notebook. Dr. Gray and I are at the main entrance, holding shovels. There's a fresh grave behind us. Thank you for your help with recycling, read the inscription on the back. I flipped through my notebook. The pages were covered with my handwriting. To erase the memory of patients 03-12, to destroy the archive of 1975, to transfer Sector B to the purge mode. Last entry, they know. We need to hide the bodies deeper. And then I remembered. Not in the details, but in the sensations. How Gray and I erased files, how documents were burned, how those who tried to tell the truth were buried. How I signed my own sentence when I began to doubt. There was a knock on the door. Appointment time, Dr. Reed. Came the voice of the cleaner with the 09 tattoo. I grabbed the gun and shot at the lock. The door flew open, and I ran, not to the exit, but down to the basement, where I had once found the notes on the walls. Now I knew what I was looking for. The hatch is under the third step, the one that we rolled up with concrete after the cleaning. With a kick, I tore down the rotten boards. There was a tunnel leading under the building below. The walls were covered with scratches, not from nails, but from shovels. This is where we hid the bodies. Hundreds, thousands. And among them I found her, Dr. Gray. Her skeleton was lying against the wall, clutching a syringe in her hand. My old badge was lying nearby. I squatted down, examining the skeleton. Her skull was turned towards me, as if she was looking even after death. There was a notebook next to it, my notebook. The first page read, Protocol 09, Destruction of Witnesses. I've always believed that the worst nightmares come from outside, from dark alleys, strange cities, chance encounters. But now I know that the scariest stories are born in silence, behind doors that we ourselves bolt shut. Mine started with an inheritance. After the death of Aunt Clara, whom I hadn't visited in 15 years, I got her house. Not a mansion, not a hut, but an ordinary two-story building with peeling paint and a veranda covered with ivy. It's even strange that she bequeathed it to me. We weren't close. She rarely wrote, and I barely remember her voice. But there was a note in the envelope with the documents. You're the only one I can trust with this place. Don't look for answers, but if you find them, don't believe them. At first, I wanted to sell the house. But when I arrived to assess the condition, something caught on. Not nostalgia, but rather curiosity. The interior smelled of damp and old wood, and the floorboards creaked like teeth from the cold. On the second floor, I found a door without a handle, bricked up. A neighbor, Mrs. Gray, whispered that Aunt Clara kept her secrets there, but she didn't say a word more. There were boxes of diaries in the basement, yellowed with age. The first entries were innocent, recipes, shopping lists, drawings of birds. But the further away, the more often there were lines written with a trembling hand. He's knocking again. I won't open it. I can't. Who is he? In the last diary, The pages were torn out, leaving only the phrase, "I'm sorry I didn't save them." I decided to stay for a week to sort through the archive. I bought groceries, checked the locks. It was stupid, but after the diaries it seemed like I was being watched. At night, I heard footsteps on the second floor. Heavy, slow, as if someone was dragging their feet. My heart was pounding, but I got up. No one. Only in the corridor by the wall. Up door there was a child's toy, a wooden soldier with a broken arm. I didn't remember Aunt Clara having children done on the third day. I found the letters. A bunch of envelopes hidden in the fireplace. The handwriting is male harsh. "Clara, it's your fault. They're hungry. You have to feed them." The dates are 1948. The letters were sent intermittently for several months. The last ones were stained with something dark. One envelope contained a photograph of 3 children in school uniforms, their faces crossed out with crosses. On the flip side, they know where you are. In the evening, I lit a fireplace to burn the letters. The fire crackled, sparks flew into the chimney, but suddenly burst into green flames. Silhouettes flashed through the smoke, too clear for a hallucination. I ran out, slamming the door, and only then did I notice the scratches on my palm, as if someone had clawed at it. Footsteps again at night, this time in the basement. The flashlight was shaking in my hand as I descended the creaking stairs. I found a trapdoor in the corner behind an old refrigerator. It's padlocked, but the chain is rusted. There was a room inside 3 meters by 3 meters, and the walls were covered with chalk, hundreds of names, dates, and drawings. There's a mattress on the floor, animal bones, and empty baby food cans. And a diary. Not Aunt Clara's, but the other one, with the inscription J. Marlowe, 1947. G.S. notes were delusional. He wrote about the hungry who live in the walls, about the parcel that needs to be fed with meat. They are growing. Emily was picked up today. I heard her screaming in the pipes. Clara was laughing. Next are the recipes. Not food. Solvents, acids. We need to cleanse them of their flesh in order to free their souls. I went to the archive this morning. Aunt Clara lived here with her husband, John Marlowe. He disappeared in 1950, 2 months before the fire that destroyed the orphanage. Newspaper clippings read, the bodies of the children were found in the basement. The suspect, the caretaker of the orphanage, J.M., committed suicide. His wife, K.M., has disappeared. But there were no photos of the children in the file. Only the list of names is the same as on the walls in the basement. When I returned, I heard crying. Thin, intermittent like a baby's. The sound came from behind the sealed door. He took a crowbar and began to loosen the bricks. Behind them was a windowless room. On the wall, the words, "We are still hungry," are carved with a knife. There's a baby carriage on the floor and remains inside. And the note, "He made me. They're still here. Burned down the house. The phone is dead. The lights went out." I lit a candle, and then I saw them in the reflection of the window, 3 figures behind me. Not shadows, not ghosts. Children, dirty, with empty eye sockets, in rags of school uniform. They were whispering, "You're our dad now." I didn't turn around. Not immediately. The candle was shaking in his hand, casting reflections on the walls, and these reflections were moving, too fast, too vividly. The flame smelled like burnt hair. I took a step forward, then another, but the floor under my feet suddenly felt soft, as if it were rotten. Plaster mixed with something dark fell from the ceiling. Blood? Dirt? I didn't check it. There was a photo album in the corner of the room. Not old, 80s. The pictures show Aunt Clara, now an elderly woman, with a group of children in the schoolyard. They were smiling and holding plasticine crafts in their hands. On the back of one of the photos, Sunny Valley Shelter. 1983, children at risk. But the faces in the pictures were crossed out with black paint, and the caption read, "They shouldn't have survived." A floorboard creaked in the doorway. I whirled around. No one. Only the wind stirred the curtains on the only window, even though the window was boarded up. The air was thick as molasses, and there was a smell in it, not of decay, not of dust. Sweet, like baby food mixed with iron. There was a wet, shiny trail on the floor leading to the stairs. Not blood. Saliva? Saliva with lumps of wool. I went up to the bedroom. The bed was made up, but there was a child's drawing under the pillow, a house, a tree, 3 crosses in the backyard. On the back, "We are underground. You'll be there soon too." I dropped the drawing, and at that moment the smoke detector went off. Sparks from the wiring? Or I ran out into the hallway and saw black smoke seeping out of the cracks in walls. Not burnt, not caustic. It smells like mint and urine. Something was rumbling in the basement. Not footsteps, but blows. Rhythmic, like a metronome. I went down. The flashlight was shining weakly, but enough to see. The hatch that I had opened in the morning was now closed. There was a shiny new lock on the chain. And a note, "You're not leaving. They're waiting." In the morning, I found a canister of gasoline in the garage. I decided to burn down the house, as Aunt Clara asked. But when I set the rag on fire to throw it into the basement, I heard laughter. Not childish. Female. It was coming from the ventilation shaft. The same laugh as on the old tapes I found in the cupboard. Aunt Clara was laughing while a child was crying off-screen. The police arrived 2 hours later. A neighbor called them after hearing the screams. But not mine. When they broke into the house, I was standing in the middle of the living room, clutching a bloody knife in my hand. There are fresh scratches on the walls and small footprints on the floor leading to the door. It's strange that the cops saw them. It's strange that they didn't detain me, even though I was covered in blood. They said the house was empty, that I was probably asleep and had a nightmare. But at the station, while the paperwork was being processed, one of the officers whispered, "Do you know why the Marlows went crazy? They fed the children from the orphanage with garbage from the meat processing plant. And when they started dying, they hid their bodies in the walls. But that's not all. They say Clara took their bones for the soup." I'm writing this in a motel right now. Their faces are outside the window. Not ghosts. Children from the Sunny Valley. They survived. They've grown up. And they're still hungry that I didn't wait for dawn. I left the car in the parking lot at the motel, took my backpack, and walked along the highway. My legs carried me on their own, as if they knew where to run. But they were everywhere. In every lamp that blinked like a bad lamp in an interrogation room. In every sound of a truck passing by. The drivers were shouting something about kids on the road, but I couldn't see anyone except shadows in the bushes. 3 days later, I reached the city. Not his own, but someone else's, with a name that has faded from memory. I rented a room on the outskirts from an old woman who didn't ask questions. On the first evening, I checked the locks and boarded up the window. But they didn't come through the window. There was an envelope in the mailbox this morning. No stamp, no return address. Inside is a newspaper clipping from 1983. Fire at the Sunny Valley Orphanage. 3 pupils were killed. The reason is arson. The suspect is in hiding. And the signature, you knew them. You could have saved them. There is a photo on the back. I'm 10 years old, in Aunt Clara's backyard. Nearby are 3 silhouettes in the distance. Children. The old hostess brought lunch and said, "You were asked." Children. They said you promised them ice cream. I ran out the back door, but there was a car in the yard. It's not new. It's rusty, with childish stickers on the back window. There was a doll inside. Her face was painted red, like blood. I found the bus station. I bought a ticket for the first flight I saw. The driver, a man with a Sunny Valley tattoo on his neck, smiled and said, "We've been waiting for you for a long time." I grabbed the knife, the one from Aunt Clara's house. The driver laughed. "Don't. We just want to talk. About Clara's recipes. About how she cooked bone soup." The bus started moving. The passengers, all wearing the same jackets, with the same scars on their faces, sang a children's song. 3 fugitives came out into the field from behind a hummock, from behind a bridge. Their voices sounded like the creak of unoiled wheels. I broke out the emergency window and jumped out on the move. I woke up in a ditch. There was a backpack nearby. It contains an album with photos from Aunt Clara's house. The children's faces were no longer crossed out in the pictures. They were smiling. Their eyes glittered like marbles. On the last page, someone wrote, "You're our dad now. You have to feed us." I got up and went. I don't know where. My legs hurt, and I could taste the sweet stuff from home in my mouth. The policeman's words kept running through my head. They survived. They've grown up. And then I heard siren. An ambulance was speeding along the highway. The Sun Valley emblem is on board. The driver's face flashed through the window, a woman with gray hair pulled back in a bun. Like Aunt Clara's. She smiled and waved at me. I didn't wait for the car to stop. He ran, without taking apart the road, through bushes, ravines, until he ran into a fence, tall with barbed wire. There's a building behind it, a former hospital, judging by the peeling sign. Now there's something like an archive here. There's light in the windows. He crawled through a hole in the net. The guard was sleeping in the booth, and there was an open folder on the table, case number 447. The Sunny Valley Shelter. Closed due to... Then the text was filled with coffee. But the photos remained. The same kids from the album. It was only now that I recognized them. I saw it on the bus at the motel, in the rear-view mirror. The main building smelled of mold and medicines. There are maps marked on the walls. Zone A, quarantine. Zone B, food. I found a diary in the director's office. Not Clara, but another person. March 23rd, 1983. The Marlowe group is out of control. They started taking the children. They didn't kill me, they used me. Bones, muscles, skin for the broth. They say it cures. I tried to stop them, but they threatened to reveal my secret. The inspection is coming soon. We need to hide everything. I found freezers in the basement of the archive. In one, there are stacks of boxes labeled biomaterial, for research purposes. In the other, there are children's teeth strung on a string like beads. And a note, they don't feel pain. They want you to feel. He ran out into the street. It got dark. There's that ambulance in the parking lot. The doors are open. Inside is a wheelchair with straps on it, and a syringe. It's big with yellow liquid. On the label, KM's prescription for soothing. He hid behind the trash cans. Waited. An hour later, a truck arrived. 3 people got out of the cab, in overalls with their faces hidden under masks. One was carrying a sack, wiggling. They threw him into a van and drove away. I came closer. The bag was torn. There's a child's hand on the ground. Bitten. I returned to the city at night. I got a room at another motel. I found a box under the bed. It contains my childhood photos. And a letter from Aunt Clara. I'm sorry I didn't tell you the truth. You were one of them. But I saved you. Burned out the infection. Now it's your turn to feed them. There was a knock on the door this morning. Children's voices. Dad, we brought you a present. You're like us now. See, they were holding a jar. There was an eye floating inside. Mine. Torn out in an accident. I didn't answer. He didn't move. The police were shouting, but their voices sounded muffled, as if I was diving into water. The children's laughter in the walls grew louder. Not an echo, but a real choir. Then I noticed one of the cops had a scar on his neck. The same one that the bus driver has. Sunny Valley. He stepped forward, and at that moment, the basement wall collapsed. Not an explosion, but rot. The planks crumbled to dust, revealing a passage. There was a woman standing in it. A face like Aunt Clara's, but younger. In his hand is a knife with a bone handle. You have to finish what you started, she said. They're hungry. The police did not shoot. We watched her approach. I pulled out my revolver, but she laughed. You're not going to shoot. You know that this is your family. And then I realized the cops' jackets, their shoes, were all made of the same fabric as the children's clothes from the orphanage. The woman rushed at me. I fired. The bullet hit her shoulder, but she didn't stop. She just smiled wider. You always aim poorly. Her words stuck into my brain like hooks. Shadows crept out of the passage in the wall. Not ghosts, but people. Dirty, with skinned faces. They grabbed the policeman and bit into their necks with their teeth. Blood was pouring onto the floor, mixing with gasoline. I ran. I got out through the window. There's a crowd outside. Not adults. Children. 100, 200 pairs of eyes. They were whispering, "Dad, you promised to feed us." In his hands were cans of what was left of the police officers. I shot into the gas tank of the car. Explosion. Flame. He ran through a field until he fell into a river. The water smelled of iron. I found a bag on the shore. It contains a gun, money, and a passport in my name. And a note, "Run. They're everywhere." I'm on the train now. The compartment is empty. Only the old man opposite is reading the newspaper. Headline, "Mass Murder in the Suburbs." The suspect is a former employee of the Sunny Valley shelter. The photo is my face. The old man smiles. He has no tongue. Instead, there's a scar, similar to the ones I saw in the basement. He holds out his hand. There's a child's tooth in it. My tooth. I staggered back, hitting my head on the glass. The train was rushing into the tunnel. The old man stood up, not taking his eyes off me. His mouth was moving as if he was chewing something. Then I saw. There were pieces of skin between the teeth. Human. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. They're heavy, like the guards at the orphanage. The old man opened the compartment door a crack and whispered, "They're here." And he disappeared. I jumped out into the vestibule. 3 men in railroad uniforms were walking toward me. The faces are covered with masks. Syringes are in his hands. Jumped off the train, on the move. He fell into the bushes and rolled over. There is a highway nearby. I stopped the truck. The driver is a woman with gray hair. "Sit down," she said. "I know who you are." We drove in silence. 2 hours later, she stopped at an abandoned bridge. "Look for a hole under the boards." It's true. There were skeletons in the pit. Dozens. All with tags. Patient number 12. KM's son. My tooth in my pocket started to burn like a coal. I threw it away, but it stuck to my palm. The woman laughed. "This is not the end. You're part of the chain now. They'll eat you until you get hurt enough to become one of them." I found a hut in the morning. Inside is a man with no legs. "I've been watching you," he croaked. "You have to kill her." The woman from the train. "She's next in line." I didn't listen. He went out, but turned around on the threshold. There's a photo of me on the wall, with the date of death. Today's. I didn't wait for the man in the hut to say anything else. I ran out, but the same female driver was standing on the street. He had a knife in his hand, and blood was running down the blade. "You've been running for too long," she said. "It's time to feed." There was a pit next to the hut. Fresh earth, a shovel. I rushed into the forest, but the trees seemed to be moving, slowing down. The branches clung to the clothes like fingers. An hour later, I went out to the highway. The ambulance was parked on the side of the road. The driver is an old woman with a bun like Aunt Clara's. She waved her hand. "Sit down. I'll take you to a safe place." The cabin smelled of bleach and blood. There are syringes and empty blood bags on the shelf. "Do you know why Clara chose you?" "What is it?" she asked, not looking at the road. "You were the only one who could digest their flesh. A special protein in the blood. She's been testing you for years." I grabbed the knife, but the old woman laughed. "Don't be silly. You can taste it, right? Sweet like baby food? It's them. They're already inside." The car stopped at an abandoned factory. There are dozens of people in identical lab coats inside. They were butchering the bodies. Not adults, but children. The meat was put in barrels with the inscription, "Children's Aid Fund." One of the workers came up to me. His face is scarred, his eyes are empty. "You have to choose," he croaked. "Either you feed them or you become fodder." I ran to the exit. There were shouts and laughter behind him. There's a lock on the door, but there was a key nearby, the one that the guard from the archive left. When he got out, he fell to the ground. The taste of rust is in my mouth. Her hands were shaking, and her nails were broken. There's a photo in my pocket. I'm 10 years old with Aunt Clara. There's a new inscription on the reverse side. "You're already dead. I just haven't stopped yet." I ran until I hit the river. The water is black and thick. There's a boat on the shore. There was a boy in it. 10, maybe 12 years. scarred face, eyes like mine. "They're waiting for you," he said. "On the other shore." Cross the forest. The old house. Not the one he inherited, but the other one. There's light in the windows. He entered. There's a woman inside. The mother? No. A face like Aunt Clara's, but younger. "You came," she smiled. "We were preparing a place for you." There's an album on the table. My photos, with dates, weights, and tests. Last entry, ready. You can start feeding. There is a kitchen in the basement. Pots, knives, barrels labeled Clara's soup. There are recipes on the wall. Children under 10 years old, 500 grams of meat per serving. Salt to taste. The woman grabbed a knife. I fired. The bullet hit her shoulder, but she didn't fall. She just laughed. "Do you think it hurts?" "It's nothing. That's when they start eating you from the inside." He ran out into the street. The car. The driver is a man with a scar on his neck. Sunny Valley. He wasn't surprised to see me. "I know who you are. Sit down. I'll take you to the others." We drove in silence. 2 hours later, the city. Not mine. Alien. We stopped at the hospital. There is a sign in the lobby, Children's Department. The sponsor is the Clara Marlowe Foundation. There are children in the wards. Associated. There are syringes on the bedside tables. The doctor in the white coat turned to me. "They want you to feed them. It's your duty." I ran. Through corridors, stairs. I found a way out. There are police officers on the street. Not mine. Strangers. "Stop it. Stop it," they shouted. "You're under arrest for the murder of Clara Marlowe." He fired into the air. I ran until I fell. The taste of blood is in my mouth. Sweet, like baby food. I woke up in my office. Not a hospital, but an office. On the table there are monitors, folders labeled Solar Valley Project. In front of me is a man in a suit. "You have passed all the tests," he said. "A unique case. Your body assimilates their DNA. Now you are the connecting link." The children came through the door. The ones from the photos. Alive. But the eyes are empty like dolls. "They will listen to you," the man nodded. "You're their new dad." The last thing I remember is the syringe in my hand, and children's laughter. Not in my head, but in the corridors. Everywhere.